After the divorce, the stunning CEO kneels and begs me to return. Liu Yu. Be sensible, sign this document, and from now on, sever all ties with Liu Yanran. Outside an old courtyard in Yanqing, a man with a slicked back hairstyle, wearing a white suit, threw a document heavily into the arms of a young man at the door. Looking at the words, divorce agreement, on the cover, Liu Yu stood stunned for a moment, then glanced at the suit-wearing man in front of him, who had a proud, arrogant expression. Divorce, who are you? Who I am is none of your concern. The man in the suit raised his hand impatiently, cutting off Liu Yu's question. You've been married to Liu Yanran for over a year, and you do nothing but stay in this shabby courtyard, living off her while she works hard outside. Now she's becoming a rising star in the business world, and what about you? You're just a useless gigolo, living off a woman. This document has already been signed by Liu Yanran. Now you sign it too, and... The man in the suit beckoned with his finger. The bodyguard beside him immediately opened a suitcase. This box of money is your compensation. Sign the document, and it'll be enough for you to live here for decades, eating and doing nothing. As he finished speaking, the man in the suit provocatively flipped the box open, and stacks of red banknotes tumbled out onto the ground at Liu Yu's feet. Is this Liu Yanran's decision? Liu Yu's face was cold, his gaze not even falling on the money. Instead, he looked at a luxury car parked outside the alley. As his eyes shifted, a faint golden light flashed in his gaze that others couldn't see. Seeing Liu Yu distracted, the man in the suit waved his hand impatiently at the bodyguards. Damn it, stop wasting my time. Hold him down and make him sign. Yes. The bodyguards immediately stepped forward and surrounded Liu Yu. At that moment. Stop. A cool, elegant voice rang out. A woman in a professional black stockings outfit, with a delicate face and a confident aura, walked into the alley. Click-clack. The sound of high heels echoed as the woman approached, exuding a powerful, commanding presence. Liu Yu. Liu Yanran looked at Liu Yu and said directly, I've had enough. We've been married for more than a year. I've worked hard to build my company while you stayed here, studying fortune-telling and mixing with lowly neighbors. Although I didn't want to care about what others say, there's truth in the saying, excellence is mutual. You're no longer good enough for me. This is the truth. Let's part ways amicably. As the cold words left her lips, Liu Yu felt his chest tighten. An invisible force seemed to swell from within him, spreading uncontrollably. At a critical moment, Liu Yu quickly suppressed the energy by force, and everyone only felt a slight breeze pass by. However, if they looked closely at the stone slab beneath Liu Yu's feet, they would see fine spiderweb-like cracks clearly etched into it. 2 years ago, he had descended from the heavenly gate following his master's final command to face the tribulation in Yanqing. Refining the heart in the mundane world, cleansing all worldly desires. Once he succeeded, he would reach the great celestial master realm. But if he fell into worldly desires, his cultivation would be severed, and he would be left as an ordinary man. After arriving in Yanqing, by a twist of fate, he married Liu Yanran, a fresh university graduate, and secretly used the resources from the heavenly gate to help her build her career. However, over the course of their marriage, Liu Yu's cultivation was gradually sealed as he became trapped in the tribulation. This is why he returned to this courtyard seeking a way to break through his tribulation. But after Liu Yanran spoke these decisive words, the heart he had long let go of began to stir once again. A hidden power seemed to resurface, with faint signs of breaking through. Watching the silent Liu Yanran's red lips parted again, her tone tinged with pity. Liu Yu, don't be too upset. I don't blame you. Some people are just naturally lazy. Now, sign the document. This money is my and Liu Xiao's compensation to you, and it's not a small amount. Hearing this, Liu Yu glanced at the man in the suit. He had already figured out who this man was, someone who had appeared beside Liu Yanran at some point. Love is a tormenting thing. I've heard it before, felt it before, but now I see, it's all empty. Liu Yu murmured softly. Liu Yanran's abandonment made his year-long feelings seem like a joke. Damn, what are you mumbling about? Liu Xiao shot a glare at Liu Yu and, unable to hold his frustration, kicked a stone he spotted on the ground. With a loud bang, the stone flew into the door, causing it to shake. Liu Yu looked at Liu Yanran, his voice calm but resolute. Since the bond is broken, I won't force it. From now on, we sever all ties. As he spoke, Liu Yu signed his name on the document and handed it back to her. He then turned his attention to the arrogant Liu Xiao. The door guardian is sacred. Respect it, and it brings sincerity. Offend it, and it brings calamity. With your kick, you've invoked a curse. You won't live past 7 days. At that moment, the door of the courtyard trembled ominously, radiating an eerie energy. You. Liu Xiao's face darkened, but Liu Yanran quickly grabbed his arm, speaking softly, let it go. From now on, he and I are from 2 different worlds. Don't waste your time with him. Liu Xiao smiled in agreement but shot one last vicious look at Liu Yu. I won't deal with you today, but you'll regret it. You won't live past 7 days. With that, Liu Xiao embraced Liu Yanran's waist, leading his bodyguards away. Standing alone, Liu Yu turned back to look at the courtyard. In his eyes, the entire yard had transformed. Golden runes floated in the air, radiating brilliant light, reaching toward the sky. This was the Heavenly Gate's residence in the mortal realm. Though no successor had stayed here for generations, the residual incense still kept the evil energy of Yanqing at bay. As Liu Yu's cultivation began to recover, all of this became visible again. He exhaled softly and stepped into the courtyard. The door automatically closed behind him, but a strand of evil energy seemed to writhe, like an angry dragon or serpent. It was the result of Liu Xiao's kick. Liu Yu's words about him not surviving 7 days were no idle threats. At the same time, as Liu Xiao and his group reached the alley, they saw a procession of luxury cars approaching in the distance, all with distinctive leopard plates, lining up grandly at the alley entrance. As the car doors opened, a group of men in black jumped out, exuding a steely aura. They stood respectfully, forming 2 lines. At that moment, a tall, cold, and breathtakingly beautiful woman stepped out from the middle of a long luxury car. A faint touch of makeup accentuated her aristocratic appearance. That's Liu Xiao squinted, instantly recognizing her. That's Miss Jiang from the Yanqing family. What is she doing here? Liu Xiao's face changed slightly, and he instinctively signaled his men to clear the way. Beside him, Liu Yanran took a step back, feeling nervous. The Jiang family of Yanqing was a century-old aristocratic family one Liu Yanran had never dared to approach, despite her recent entrance into the upper echelons of society. Amid the astonished gazes of the crowd, Jiang Meng walked into the alley with purpose. Her steps were quick yet seemed full of respect and humility, and she headed straight for Liu Yu's courtyard. As she approached, her bodyguards quickly handed her a mat. Without hesitation, Jiang Meng, the distinguished lady of the Jiang family, knelt in the middle of the street, respectfully and solemnly declaring, I am from the Yanqing family. I seek an audience with the Lord of the Heavenly Gate. Chapter 2, The Jiang Family of Yanqing, Seeking the Master of Tianmen. At the alley entrance. When Liu Xiao saw this scene, he rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Crazy, this is definitely crazy. At this moment, Liu Xiao was not the only one in shock. Yanqing also looked at the situation in utter disbelief. The young lady of Yanqing's top-tier aristocratic family, actually kneeling at someone else's door in broad daylight. And that someone was her recently divorced husband, whom she had just kicked away with 1 foot. What on earth was going on? What was this about, Master of Tianmen? If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would have thought she was losing her mind. No. Even now, she couldn't believe it. Liu Xiao and she were both certain that Liu Yu had somehow fallen into shady dealings, tricking his way into fooling the Jiang family. Still in a daze, the 2 of them suddenly felt a sharp, cold gaze. It was the bodyguard standing next to Jiang Meng, who turned to glance at them with icy eyes. Let's go. Liu Xiao quickly pulled Yanqing away, and they got into the car. Only then did they both let out a deep sigh. Damn, today's been a weird day. The Jiang family's eldest daughter actually came here to kneel. By the way, didn't you say Liu you like to study fortune telling and such? Looks like this little gigolo is pretty impressive, even fooling Jiang Meng into thinking he's some kind of guru. He's really not afraid of dying without a grave. Beside him, Yanqing sneered and felt both contempt and relief. A useless man was still a useless man. He couldn't even be honest about eating soft rice. He had to pretend to be some kind of spiritual master. It was a good thing that she had already cut ties with him. Otherwise, once the Jiang family found out the truth, she would also be dragged down by this useless man. HMPH, maybe this is your fate. Yanqing scoffed, then seductively leaned into Liu Xiao's arms as the car drove away. On the other side, outside the courtyard, Jiang family of Yanqing, seeking the master of Tianmen. Jiang Meng bit her red lip and spoke again. Her beautiful face showed signs of fatigue and exhaustion that made one's heart ache. Half a year ago, just after she took over the family business from her grandfather, the old man suddenly fell into a coma without warning. The Jiang family spared no expense, using all their connections and resources, inviting many renowned doctors both from home and abroad, but no one could find the cause of the grandfather's condition. His life signs were gradually deteriorating. It wasn't until 3 months ago that the Jiang family, desperate, received a piece of information from a large family in the north. Kneel and knock on the door with sincerity, and you will meet the master of Tianmen. That was the only message they received, along with an address. Upon receiving this message, the Jiang family immediately traced the address and found Liu Yu's courtyard. For 3 long months, the Jiang family visited every day, but they received no response. They even tried to force their way in. But this ordinary courtyard door, no matter what method they tried, would not open. Even the bodyguards, who were capable of taking on 10 men at once, when attempting to climb over the wall, would mysteriously faint. Although they would wake up with no after effects, it proved that this courtyard was full of strange and mystical forces. For these 3 months, Jiang Meng never gave up, day after day, kneeling and knocking on the door. Jiang family, seeking the master of Tianmen. Jiang Meng lowered her body, her voice hoarse, as if she had used up all her strength. A middle-aged man beside her, seeing her exhausted state, spoke with concern. "Miss, it's been 3 knocks. If it's not meant to be, it's just not. We can come back tomorrow to visit Master Liu." The knocking ritual had been passed down from the old neighbors around the alley. But Jiang Meng, stubborn as she was, did not stand up. Her face was streaked with tear marks. "Miss, please get up." The man reached out with a pained expression, wanting to pull Jiang Meng up. But at that moment, creak! The old wooden door slowly creaked open a crack, and a calm, warm voice came from within. "Come in." Hearing their voice, Jiang Meng's head snapped up. She looked at the man beside her, disbelieving. "Deng Shu, this." Jiang Meng pointed towards the courtyard, then, fighting back her emotions, stood up and nervously pushed open the door. As soon as she stepped inside, she saw Liu Yu standing in the courtyard. With just one glance, Jiang Meng froze in place. This was the legendary master of Tianmen? She had expected someone older, more imposing, but instead, the man before her looked young and ordinary, dressed in plain clothes. But as her gaze settled on his face, she felt a momentary jolt in her heart. A sense of etherealness seemed to wash over her, along with a deep and unfathomable aura. Jiang Meng greets the master of Tianmen. "I apologize for the disturbance, but my grandfather fell into a mysterious coma half a year ago, and no treatment has worked. I beg Master Liu to save him." Jiang Meng stepped forward, her determination evident as she bit her lip and said, "As long as you are willing to help, the Jiang family will agree to any condition, including me." After saying that, Jiang Meng lowered her head, unsure whether it was out of shame or helplessness. She could only wait for Liu Yu's response. Liu Yu's gaze fell on Jiang Meng. He remembered her, the girl who had been knocking on his door day after day for 3 months. However, before, he had been trapped in his own trials and had no strength to deal with matters like this, so he hadn't seen her. But now, having successfully passed his tribulations, he finally had the strength to help. Jiang Meng was, in a sense, a witness to his struggle, and this seemed like a coincidence, a twist of fate. "Take me to the Jiang family." Liu Yu spoke softly, his eyes lingering on Jiang Meng's surprised face for a brief moment. Even though his mind had returned to the orthodox path, he couldn't help but admit that this girl was a true beauty. From her aura to her appearance, she was stunning beyond words. Back at the courtyard, watching Liu Yu walk ahead, Jiang Meng snapped out of her reverie and hurriedly called to her bodyguards. "Quick, get in the car and lead the way." Not long after, they arrived at a scenic area on the outskirts of Yanqing. On the mountainside, a grand and majestic estate stood against the hillside. This was the Jiang family estate. The luxury cars drove along the mountain road and entered the estate, heading straight to a traditional Chinese courtyard in the heart of the grounds. "Master Liu, please." Jiang Meng personally opened the car door for Liu Yu and led him inside. They arrived at a bedroom on the 2nd floor of a side courtyard. When Liu Yu entered the room, he saw the elderly man lying in bed, with numerous tubes and wires connected to him, his eyes closed. Master Liu, I beg you, Jiang Meng said, her voice trembling as she gazed at the elderly man. Please save him. Liu Yu nodded slightly, his eyes flashing briefly with golden light. At that moment, he could clearly sense a heavy aura of malicious energy surrounding the old man, thick enough to obscure his features. This is a strong malice. Liu Yu frowned slightly, stepping forward, and reached his hand out toward the old man. As his hand neared, the malicious energy seemed to respond, gathering together as if alive, pushing against his hand. At the same time, a silent scream echoed in Liu Yu's ears. Chapter 3, The Curse. Mr. Liu, can my grandfather be saved? Jiang Meng could not see the sinister energy, but she noticed the change in Liu Yu's expression. He can be saved. Liu Yu turned around and lightly nodded, then without further politeness, he raised his hand and placed it on Jiang Leoi's body. The so-called sinister energy was a collective term for negative emotions manifesting in the world. The death of humans, the decay of all things, and even the turbulence of the heavens could all give rise to boundless sinister energy, a force that could not be eradicated no matter how much one tried. Let me see what's behind this sinister energy. Liu Yu murmured, and an 8-trigram symbol slowly appeared in the center of his forehead, rotating steadily. At that moment. Stop! A stern voice came from the door. A middle-aged man, accompanied by a group of bodyguards, barged into the room as if kicking the door open. Liu Yu naturally heard the noise and leisurely turned to look. When Jiang Meng saw the middle-aged man, her face suddenly changed, but she seemed to suppress something and spoke to him. Second uncle, why are you here? Why am I here? HMPH, that's a question I should be asking you. The middle-aged man came in and immediately scolded Jiang Meng. The old man has been in a coma for half a year, and now his condition is worsening day by day. Yet you're bringing in some nonsense people to disturb him. What are you trying to do? Jiang Meng's face turned green and white with anger. She retorted, Second uncle, what are you saying? This is Liu Qianxia from the Qianmen sect. I've worked hard to bring him here to save Grandpa. This is the so-called Liu Qianxia you've been worshipping and begging to help every day. After learning that Liu Yu was the mysterious Qianmen master, the middle-aged man gave him a cold look from head to toe. Liu Qianxia, huh? My niece is young, and she just took over the family business. She lacks experience, but I'm not so easily fooled. I don't believe in things like feng shui, fortune-telling, and all that nonsense. As he spoke, the middle-aged man waved his hand coldly. 7 or 8 bodyguards stepped forward immediately. Do you leave on your own, or should I have my men escort you out? Upon hearing this, Liu Yu's face darkened slightly. Before he could speak. Second uncle. Jiang Meng couldn't hold back any longer and glared at him angrily. You've gone too far. Don't forget, I'm the head of the Jiang family. The middle-aged man froze for a moment, then tilted his head back slightly, his face showing a faint, contemptuous smile as he looked at Jiang Meng. Seeing the tension rise. Looks like this young lady still can't control the situation, Liu Yu muttered, glancing at the helpless Jiang Meng and then at the middle-aged man. He wasn't interested in their family drama, but he didn't like this man's attitude. You don't believe in all this nonsense, right? Liu Yu smiled and walked toward the middle-aged man. Right. The middle-aged man scoffed, giving a look to the bodyguards, and the group charged toward Liu Yu. Heh. Liu Yu's smile didn't fade. He took a slow step, only using a little force with his foot. Whoosh. An invisible wave of air surged from under Liu Yu's foot. Under this invisible force, the bodyguards, who had been poised to strike, suddenly turned pale. Their eyes went white, and they collapsed to the ground, all in a heap. You? Looking at the bodyguards who had fainted eerily, the middle-aged man's face twitched. Before he could react, a hand was placed on his shoulder. What do you want to do? The middle-aged man looked at Liu Yu in fear, but all he got in return was Liu Yu's increasingly wide smile. I want you to believe. Now, open your eyes and look. Liu Yu raised his hand and lightly tapped the middle-aged man's shoulder. A golden light immediately spread throughout the man's body. The next second, in the middle-aged man's vision, the entire room turned misty. Thick black energy enveloped everything, like ghostly shadows swirling, mixed with occasional sunbeams. It felt as though he was standing between the realms of yin and yang, an eerie sensation that made his blood run cold. This The middle-aged man staggered backward in fright, but Liu's hand pushed him back into place. Let me go. Let me go. The middle-aged man shouted in a panic. Meanwhile, Jiang Meng, with tears in her eyes, looked at the middle-aged man, her expression filled with confusion. She saw him frantically waving his hands, as if trying to banish something terrible. Lu Qianxia. Jiang Meng hesitated, wanting to say something but stopping herself. Though she was grateful for Liu's intervention, she didn't want to see her second uncle dying of fright in front of her. Liu Yu glanced at Jiang Meng, understanding the concern in her eyes. He then released the middle-aged man. Thud. The middle-aged man fell to the ground, pale and trembling uncontrollably. Well, do you believe it now? Liu Yu leaned down with a smile. The middle-aged man looked at Liu Yu's smiling face, filled with fear, dread, and anger, but his trembling hand couldn't say a word. In the end, he awkwardly stood up and fled out of the door. On the spot. Lu Qianxia. Jiang Meng saw the middle-aged man leave and no longer paid him any mind. She looked expectantly at Liu Yu. Liu Yu smiled, turned around, and placed his hand on Jiang Leoi's body once again. The 8 trigram symbol reappeared on his forehead. In an instant, an invisible golden light sealed all the sinister energy. This time, Liu Yu saw what lay behind the sinister energy. A fine black line was hidden inside Jiang Leoi's brain, locking his consciousness. And when Liu Yu's gaze touched it, the black line coiled slightly, letting out an inaudible screech. This. Liu Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. Poison. Jiang Meng immediately looked at him with a questioning gaze, but Liu Yu didn't answer her. Their poison was a technique from the Miao region, a form of sorcery that could silently invade the human body. Activate the 3 yang, open the heavenly pool, seal the sinister energy. Liu Yu pressed his hand to Jiang Leoi's chest, his thumb slicing through the skin directly toward his throat. At the same time, his other hand formed a seal and pressed down on Jiang Leoi's forehead. Out! With a low shout from Liu Yu. Scree! A strange, piercing scream emanated from Jiang Leoi's throat. Jiang Meng was startled by the noise and instinctively grabbed onto Liu Yu's sleeve. Don't worry, it's fine now. Liu Yu turned back and smiled at Jiang Meng. Then he loosened his grip. Jiang Leoi suddenly spit out a mouthful of black blood, which landed on the bedsheet, thick like jelly, with what seemed like countless tiny creatures wriggling inside. The poison has been forced out. If nothing goes wrong, your grandfather should wake up soon. As for these things on the sheet, burn them with fire. Liu Yu instructed Jiang Meng before heading toward the door. Lu Qianxia. Jiang Meng hurriedly followed, but Liu Yu stopped her with a wave. The matter of saving him is over. Take care of your grandfather. Farewell. Watching Liu Yu leave, Jiang Meng bit her lip and gave instructions to the bodyguards. She stayed behind to tend to Jiang Leoi. Meanwhile, in a 3-story villa on the estate, Jiang Leoi's second brother stood at the window, coldly watching the car drive away. I didn't expect that dead girl Jiang Meng would really find someone capable. I hope this kid doesn't ruin my plans. Mind your own business. You'll die. Chapter 4, I can't bear it anymore, I don't need to bear it anymore. Soon. Return to the old town. As soon as he got off the car, Liu Yu's eyes suddenly froze. I saw it in the alley. A young man in his early 20s was standing with one foot on the door-god stone outside the yard, holding a seductively dressed woman in his arms. Next to him was a woman in her 50s and 7 or 8 thugs with tattoos all over their bodies. A group of about 10 people were standing outside the courtyard gate, shouting and cursing. Mr. Liu, you pretty boy, get out here. Don't hide in there and keep silent. My sister promised to give you some money, but we didn't agree. Get out now. Fuck it, give me your money back. Looking at this scene at this moment, Liu Yu's eyes were filled with undisguised disgust. This young man was Liu Yanran's younger brother, Liu Dong. The woman next to her is Liu Yanran's mother, Zhang Cuiping. What are you doing here? Liu Yu walked over slowly and said in a cold tone. When Liu Dong heard the voice, he looked back and a provocative look immediately appeared on his face. Mr. Liu, hey, you finally showed up. As he spoke, Liu Dong pouted at the charming woman in his arms. Nuo, this is the pretty boy I was talking about. He usually relies on my sister for support and just eats and waits for death. Now he was kicked out by my sister. I'll ask again, why are you here? Liu Yu suppressed his anger and said coldly. Hey, what kind of attitude is this? Liu Dong twisted his mouth and was about to speak when he was interrupted by Zhang Cuiping. You little bastard, don't think I don't know. Today my daughter kicked you away and gave you a box of money, right? Zhang Cuiping put her hands on her hips and cursed. You are a useless gigolo. You have wasted my daughter's youth for several years and you still have the nerve to take the money. Spit it out. Right. Liu Dong stepped on the door god stone and stood up, barely taller than Liu Yu. He said defiantly, and this yard of yours. My sister dumped you, so we have to take this yard back. The housing prices in Yanqing are not cheap. If this old house is demolished in the future, it will definitely cost a lot of money. As he spoke, Liu Dong took the hand of the charming woman and smiled flatteringly on his face. Xiaomai, I'll ask my sister to give me the yard, and we can live here when we have nothing to do. Do you think it's satisfactory? When Zhang Cuiping saw how calculating Liu Dong was, a look of satisfaction immediately appeared on her face. As expected of my son, he is smart, really smart. The charming woman tilted her head and looked around the yard. It's a little worn, but it's okay. At this time, these three people were busy with their own calculations and completely ignored Liu Yu's existence. It is said that people's shamelessness has no limit. Today I have witnessed it. You want money and a house. You have calculated all these advantages. Liu Yu looked at these two bitches, and an inexplicable smile slowly appeared on the corner of his mouth. At the same time, an invisible aura gathered on him. He really could not have imagined that after more than a year of marriage, his sincere efforts did not get any recognition from this family. Instead, after the divorce, they were still thinking of scheming against him. They were so shameless. On the side, Liu Dong heard Liu Yu's words and felt like he had heard a huge joke. Har 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 har, Mr. Liu, don't think we're here to discuss things with you. I'm telling you, either you hand over everything in disgrace, or I'll. Liu Dong's eyes turned fierce and he turned around and waved to the 7 or 8 thugs. Brothers, get this pretty boy for me. As long as you don't kill him, do whatever you want. Okay. 7 or 8 thugs immediately rubbed their hands together, grinning hideously, and surrounded Liu Yu. Liu Yu, who was surrounded, let out a breath of cold air. I can no longer bear it. I don't need to bear it anymore. Besides, he really didn't want to endure it for even a second. Boom! Liu Yu took a step on the ground, an invisible wave of air surged out from his body, and he raised his hand to grab the nearest gangster. You! The gangster's face changed, because the power in Liu Yu's hand was as unshakable as Mount Tai. Before he could react, Liu Yu grabbed him and turned him around, and the other thugs had almost no chance to resist and were all knocked to the ground. These guys who usually fight violently on the streets couldn't even last a second in Liu Yu's hands. This. Liu Dong and Zhang Cuiping were both stunned by this sudden change. Liu Yu took a step forward and came in front of Liu Dong with a smile. Who did you say you wanted to deal with? I? Liu Dong opened his mouth, but finally swallowed his saliva in a cowardly manner. Although Liu Yu had a smile on his face at this moment, that expression looked like the smile of the god of death from hell in Liu Dong's eyes. Bang! Liu Yu slapped Liu Dong in the face, sending him flying for 5 meters away. He landed on the ground and spit out a mouthful of blood mixed with fallen teeth. Arr! Zhang Cuiping also reacted at this time and let out a scream. My son, you little beast, you! Before Zhang Cuiping could finish her words, a slap came towards her with a whistling sound. Bang! Zhang Cuiping turned 7 or 8 times, her head raised with blood spurting out, and she rolled over in the corner against the wall. At this time, the charming woman was completely stunned when she saw this scene. Then she saw Liu Yu's eyes sweeping towards her, and she was immediately frightened and squatted on the ground with her head in her hands. After the fight, Liu Yu couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Comfortable. I feel so comfortable all over. And at this time, Zhang Cuiping, who was at the foot of the wall, slowly climbed up. Half of her face was swollen like a pig's head, and her mouth couldn't close. Huh! Liu Yu looked at Zhang Cuiping in surprise. Little bastard, you are so brave. Your daughter is Liu Yanran, your daughter is from the Liu group. Liu Wei, you. Zhang Cuiping pointed at Liu Yu with slurred speech and trembling voice. In return, Liu Yu's eyes turned cold and he pretended to raise his hand. R. Zhang Xueping was so scared that she covered her face and dared not speak anymore. She quickly waved at Xiaomai. The charming woman reacted quickly, avoiding Liu Yu's gaze, picked up the dizzy Liu Dong and ran away. Just wait, you're dead, I'll ask my brother-in-law to kill you. After the seductive woman ran away, she turned back and said something vicious to Liu Yu, then she helped Zhang Xueping and the other person escape without even looking back. As for the gangster who fainted on the ground, no one cared about him at all. Oh, Liu Wei. Liu Yu sneered and turned to look at the evil aura on the door. He will die within 7 days. Back to the yard. Unlucky. Liu Yu couldn't help but let out a puh sound, then went back to his room and started meditating. Now that the calamity of breaking the path has passed, the realm of the great heavenly master is just around the corner. I don't know how much time passed. When Liu Yu opened his eyes, it was already evening outside the window, and the sunset glowed like blood. Liu Yu found the package he brought down the mountain, which contained a Qianmen secret book and a Taoist robe. In addition, there is a long sword placed under the incense table. The hilt of the sword has 3 golden dragon carvings that are entwined and circling. The sword body is more than 3 feet long and is made entirely of black iron. When you look up, the rich blood energy almost hits you in the face. Qianmen. Seal the veins and cut off the ancient times, and suppress the world. The so-called sealing of the meridians refers to suppressing all the evil in the world. To cut off the ancient means to cut off everything that does not belong to this era. Therefore, Qianmen is also known as the most mysterious inheritance. It is the sword in the hands of God, used to determine the destiny of the world. As a disciple of Qianmen, the thought of killing alone is enough to make people tremble. At this time, Liu Yu, who was holding the Qiansha sword again, had a bright golden light in his eyes, and the scene of going down the mountain 2 years ago appeared in his mind. That day, the sky was covered with dark clouds, and there were lightning and thunder. When the master returned from his travels, his body was covered in blood. Before his death, he was driven down the mountain to transcend the tribulation. If he could not reach the realm of the great heavenly master, he should never return to the mountain. In fact, Liu Yu knew it very well. This time going down the mountain was more like a kind of protection from his master. Now that the catastrophe has passed, he only needs the final push to go back and unravel the confusion and truth that have lingered in his heart for 2 years. Chapter 5, Meeting at the Banquet. The other side. A high-end office building in the center of Yanqing City. At this moment, in the office, there were unbearable moans. Liu Yanran lay on the sofa, her eyes blurred and she bit her red lips slightly. Viagra. Their hot breath continued to spread throughout the office. A pair of slender handprints appeared on the floor-to-ceiling window at some point, sliding from top to bottom, leaving a blurry trail. Quite a while. Pack up, I'll take you to see the world later. Liu Wei was leaning lazily on the sofa, holding a cigarette in his mouth. Where are you going? Liu Yanran looked at Liu Wei in confusion. Liu Wei gave Liu Yanran a mysterious smile, and then said solemnly, Jiang family, dinner. Liu Yanran, who was just being nonchalant, suddenly became alert when she heard the word Jiang family. Even though her company had grown bigger over the past year, she still had the help of the Liu group to reach the threshold of Yanqing's upper-class society. And the Jiang family is the core of the upper-class society. Not to mention the Jiang family's dinner party, the dignitaries who could attend were all people she could never come into contact with under normal circumstances. How out of reach this was for her. Real. An ecstatic look appeared on Liu Yanran's face. Liu Wei was very satisfied with Liu Yanran's expression. He curled his lips and said proudly, Certainly. And at this time, there was a sudden and hurried knock at the door. Who? Liu Yanran pulled her clothes over and put them on, looking at the door unhappily. All that could be heard was Zhang Xueping's crying and screaming. Yanran, yes, I'm going to tie it. Quite a while. Liu Yanran sat upright on the chair. On the opposite side were Zhang Xueping, who was slapping her thigh and crying loudly, Liu Dong, whose face was as swollen as a pig's head, and Xiaomai, who was secretly wiping tears beside her. What the hell is going on? There was blazing anger in Liu Yanran's eyes. Yes, jerk off. Zhang Xueping shouted incoherently. Liu Yanran naturally didn't understand, and seeing that Liu Dong's mouth was so swollen that he couldn't close it, her eyes finally fell on her sister-in-law. Elder sister. Xiaomai stood up, looking as aggrieved as a white lotus. After Auntie knew that you and Mr. Liu were divorced, she thought that you were husband and wife after all, so she said that you should go see him together and buy him some gifts. After all, Auntie still recognized Mr. Liu very much. But she didn't expect that Mr. Liu would. It's fine that Dongzi was beaten. After all, Mr. Liu is my ex-brother-in-law. It's understandable that he's in a bad mood, but he actually beat my aunt like this. And, he also said that he would haunt you for the rest of his life, destroy your family, and not stop until he kills you and young Master Liu. Ahead. When Liu Yanran heard this, she stood up instantly and said coldly, "Did he really say that?" Aside. Liu Wei was also furious. He slammed the table with a murderous look in his eyes. Since this idiot is determined to die, I will grant his wish. At this time, Zhang Cuiping was completely stunned by Xiaomai's performance, her eyes full of admiration. This little girl is so understanding. It's his family's style. Thinking in her mind, Zhang Cuiping nodded desperately to cooperate, with an expression as if she had suffered a great injustice. Okay, I know about this. I'll arrange to send you to the hospital first. As Liu Yanran spoke, she called her secretary to send Zhang Cuiping and the others out. On the sofa, Liu Wei stood up and hugged Liu Yanran's waist, his eyes cold, and he said, "That kid cursed me this morning, and now it's time to settle the score with me. Leave it to me." Liu Wei waved his hand with great dominance. "But the most urgent thing right now is the Jiang family's dinner party, so don't delay it." Liu Yanran naturally knew what was important and what was not. Especially when she thought of the Jiang family, she couldn't help but hug Liu Wei and gave him a sweet kiss, not noticing at all that a black thread was wrapped around Liu Wei's neck, slowly shrinking at a speed invisible to the naked eye. The other side. Tianmen courtyard. Master Liu. Looking at Liu Yu, who came to open the door, Jiang Meng smiled, and his face looked a little more relaxed than before. "Just call me Liu Yu. Is your grandfather awake?" Liu Yu asked with a smile. "Thank you, Master Liu, for your help. Grandpa has woken up now," Jiang Meng said immediately. "Call me Liu Yu." Liu Yu looked at Jiang Meng and reminded again. Jiang Meng's pretty face turned slightly red. After hesitating for a long time, she shouted with hesitation but more joy, "Liu Yu." Liu Yu nodded. "Did your grandfather ask you to come to me?" "Yes, after Grandpa woke up, he asked me to ask you to go to the Jiang family again. He wanted to thank you in person." Hearing this, Liu Yu smiled calmly, knowing in his heart that the old man was not looking for him simply to express his gratitude. After all, as a wealthy family in Yanqing, they would not really think that everything would be fine once they wake up. Looking at Jiang Meng's expectant eyes, it seemed that there was something else. "Then what?" Liu Yu asked with a smile, and Jiang Meng's pretty face couldn't help but blush. "I would also like to invite you to the Jiang family's dinner party. Of course, this is my decision. I don't know if you have time." When saying the last few words, Jiang Meng had already turned her head away, embarrassed to look at Liu Yu. Looking at Jiang Meng's shy appearance, Liu Yu thought for a moment and agreed. "Lead the way." Jiang Meng didn't react at first, but after confirming it again and again, she immediately ran ahead happily. Quite a while. Once again came to Jiang family manor. The Jiang family is brightly lit under the night sky. It's really lively. Liu Yu smiled while looking out the window. This ring road around the mountain has all kinds of luxury cars parked from the foot of the mountain to the parking lot halfway up the mountain. There is a guard post every 3 steps and a sentry every 5 steps, and they are all guarded by bodyguards. It is obvious that those who come here are either rich or noble. Of course, although this banquet was held in a hurry, with the name of my Jiang family, no one in Yanqing dares to disrespect us. No one. Soon. The car drove straight to the Jiang family's gate, and Uncle Deng at the door immediately came over with a group of bodyguards. "Liu Yu, let's go." Jiang Meng personally welcomed Liu Yu out of the car, and the group walked towards the Jiang family manor. And at this time, countless guests' eyes were fixed on Jiang Meng and Liu Yu. "Look, that seems to be the new head of the Jiang family, Jiang Meng, the golden phoenix of the Jiang family. Hey, who is the man next to her? So young, whose son is this?" "No, look," Jiang Meng actually took a half step back. "That's clearly a respectful and humble gesture." Each voice was filled with surprise, even horror. You know, those who can come here tonight are Yanqing's dignitaries. The Jiang family, to which Jiang Meng belongs, is the top among the powerful and wealthy. But compared to these people's surprise, at this moment, the two pairs of eyes of the guests who had just arrived outside the Jiang family's door were already wide open. It was Liu Yanran and Liu Wei. Why is it him? Hey, this kid pretends to be a charlatan and actually dares to trick his way into the Jiang family. Today I will expose him in public and make him die without a burial place. Chapter 6. He is my Jiang Meng's fiancé. The other side. In the banquet hall on the first floor of the Jiang family, there were many people, toasting each other. All of them were Yanqing's dignitaries. At this time, these people's eyes had already focused on the second floor. Half a year ago, Jiang Qingshan, once the mainstay of the Jiang family and a big boss in Yanqing's business circle, suddenly disappeared without a trace. Especially since that was a critical period when Jiang Qingshan was supporting Jiang Meng to take their position, the sudden absence of such an old man from public appearances was enough to arouse the curiosity of countless people. After half a year, many people have begun to get excited. After all, the industries under the name of the Jiang family are all pieces of fat meat in the eyes of everyone, which is bound to make people tempted. Now everyone is staring at the second floor, to see whether the old man of the Jiang family will show up today. Just as everyone was waiting with bated breath, a group of people appeared from the corridor on the second floor. The spotlights converged on them. The first to appear was the second master of the Jiang family, followed by a middle-aged man with a stern face. The last one was a noble woman, supporting an old man with white hair and a youthful face. Jiang Qingshan. Everyone stared at the old man, and were all shocked. Some people have been working with the Jiang family for many years, so naturally they have joy on their faces. Some people narrowed their eyes, with a cold light flashing in their eyes, as if they were very unwilling. Others had complicated expressions, seeming to be relieved or regretful, but in the end they all showed a kind smile. Mr. Jiang, you are in good health. Old Taishan, I am Xiaozhu, you used to hold me in your arms. Old man, we miss you so much. The flatterer immediately raised his glass and shouted towards the second floor. But Jiang Qingshan didn't even look at the people downstairs. Instead, he hurried his pace and looked around anxiously, his face full of excitement. At the same time, at the entrance of the banquet hall, Jiang Meng was walking with Liu Yu. Liu Yu, I just called Grandpa, and now he is in a hurry to come out to see you. Jiang Meng secretly looked at Liu Yu's expression and spoke in a low voice. I see. Liu Yu smiled and looked at the old man on the second floor of the hall in front of him. In fact, he didn't like this kind of occasion, especially the smiling faces of these guests, who all had their own hidden thoughts, and it was full of hypocrisy and calculation. Mr. Liu, this way please. Uncle Deng and a group of bodyguards formed a human wall to block the rest of the guests and allow the two to go directly to the second floor. Little did they know. The Jiang family's attitude and Jiang Meng's look towards Liu Yu caused a huge wave in the eyes of the guests around. Jiang Meng's expression is wrong. How can the dignified Jiang family master be so respectful to a young man? Who is he? Just as everyone was talking, another group of people came to the door. They were the guests who came later, including Liu Wei and his group. Come to their hall. Liu Yu walked with Jiang Meng as the bodyguards cleared the way. Damn, this grandson can actually enjoy the guidance of a peerless beauty of Jiang Meng's status. Liu Wei's face was ferocious, with undisguised jealousy in his eyes. At the side, Liu Yanran's eyes were also filled with resentment and anger, especially when she looked at Liu Yu's back under the spotlight. Mom! Liu Yanran shouted with gritted teeth to the person behind her. Before, when Zhang Cuiping learned that Liu Yanran was going to attend the banquet, she insisted on going along to see the world. In order to cover up the scars on her face, she even put on makeup thicker than a city wall, and when she jogged a few steps, the powder residue on her face fell off. What's wrong? Zhang Cuiping quickly squeezed forward and asked curiously. Who do you think that is? Liu Wei pointed at Liu Yu in front of him. Zhang Cuiping looked up when she heard the voice, and suddenly saw Liu Yu walking towards the second floor in a confused look. It's him? Zhang Cuiping screamed. This useless gigolo, why is he here? Who is so blind to invite this little beast to the Jiang family? He is a liar, a scumbag, and a gigolo. Suddenly, everyone around heard Zhang Cuiping scream. On the side, Liu Wei and Liu Yanran tacitly did not stop it, as if they didn't hear it. Especially Liu Yanran, she had only one thought in her mind at this moment. That would destroy Liu Yu. Expose his true face. What virtue has this piece of trash possessed him? If he leaves me, he should live like a dog. That's right, he should live a humbly life like a dog. Really? Liu Yu's face in front of him suddenly turned cold. He noticed the arrival of Liu Wei and Liu Yanran from the beginning, but didn't care. A dying person. A woman who has nothing to do with him. It wasn't worth his sidelong glance, or even a second look. But he didn't expect that Zhang Cuiping, this shrew, would insult him in such an occasion. Before Liu Yu could get angry, Jiang Meng's face darkened and he turned around suddenly. What did you say? Jiang Meng's cold voice echoed in the hall. In an instant, the noisy banquet hall fell silent, and even the melodious piano music stopped. At the door, Zhang Cuiping, who was wondering how this loser Liu Yu came to the Jiang family, didn't realize that something was wrong and put her hands hard on her hips. I'm talking about that ungrateful bastard Liu Yu. This bastard took advantage of my daughter's innocence and tricked her into marriage. After marriage, he stayed at home and ate and did nothing every day. Now he was kicked out by my daughter. How could such a loser still come here? After saying that, Zhang Cuiping finally saw Jiang Meng standing next to Liu Yu. She had exquisite facial features and an elegant and noble temperament. Even her own daughter would be eclipsed by her. She was furious. Oh, I didn't expect this little bastard to be so popular with vixens. He picked up things my daughter didn't want and ate leftovers without telling anyone. As soon as Zhang Cuiping said this, the air of the entire banquet seemed to be frozen. There was a dead silence and you could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared at Zhang Cuiping with wide eyes. Where did this tough guy come from? How dare he point at Jiang Meng and curse her? Doesn't she know that this is the Jiang family's territory? Good fellow, you dare to say that President Jiang eats leftovers? Hey, look, that woman next to Liu Wei, isn't she her daughter? A second-time adulterer. You are so outspoken and vulgar. In the crowd, Liu Wei and Liu Yanran were completely stunned. They let Zhang Cuiping go because they knew she was a big talker, but they didn't expect that Zhang Cuiping would dare to speak like that. Miss Jiang, I'm sorry. Liu Yanran took the lead in bowing to Jiang Meng, and Liu Wei also forced a humble smile. Miss Jiang, this old woman's words are harsh, but I also want to remind you that you may not know who the guy next to you is. He is a charlatan who cheats and deceives people. You were deceived by him. Shut up. Before Liu Wei could finish his words, Jiang Meng's eyes were filled with anger and she swallowed back the rest of Liu Wei's words. She didn't expect that a peerless master like Liu Yu would have such a failed marriage and have such a shrewish and overbearing mother-in-law. Jiang Meng glanced sideways at Liu Yu. In addition to being angry at Zhang Cuiping and the others, she also felt inexplicably distressed for Liu Yu. At the same time, a bold idea emerged in her mind. Whether it was to help Liu Yu vent his anger or because of the indescribable feelings deep in his heart. Who is Mr. Liu? You don't need to throw dirty water on him. Jiang Meng looked at Liu Wei coldly, then glanced around, slowly reached out and took Liu Yu's arm, and said word by word, "He is my Jiang Meng's fiancé." Chapter 7. Kneel down and apologize. Boom! Jiang Meng's words were like a thunderclap, exploding in everyone's ears. Fiancé? No, it's impossible. Who is this guy? How can he become the son-in-law of the Jiang family? Jiang Meng is the white moonlight in the hearts of countless people in Yanqing. How could she be taken down so easily? I'm heartbroken. I'm going to be heartbroken. Hey, Master Wang, don't be sad. The canaries you raised in heaven and earth are all extremely talented. Bullshit, they and I are just friends, how can they compare to Goddess Jiang? Wow. Goddess, how can I live without you? There was an uproar in the hall at this moment, and everyone's eyes were fixed on Liu Yu. The person involved, Liu Yu, also looked at Jiang Meng with some confusion. However, Jiang Meng didn't dare to look at Liu Yu's expression at this time. After saying this, her heart was pounding and she was so nervous that she almost jumped out. Ahead. Liu Wei's exclamation was louder than Zhang Cuiping's before. This. How is this possible? This guy is just a loser who only eats and drinks for free. Who would be blind to marry him? And as soon as these words came out, Without waiting for Jiang Meng to speak, Uncle Deng walked towards Liu Wei with a cold look in his eyes. You dare to insult the head of the family, you are seeking death. You, don't come over here. Liu Wei reacted quickly and subconsciously hid behind Liu Yanran and Zhang Cuiping. Facing the two women, Uncle Deng paused slightly, then grabbed Zhang Cuiping. Hey, what are you doing? Oh why, save me. Zhang Cuiping screamed like a pig being slaughtered and struggled non-stop, flapping her hands. At the side, Liu Yanran's eyes were also full of anxiety, especially when she looked at Liu Wei hiding behind her. There was a bit of surprise in her eyes. At this time, Deng Bo was annoyed by Zhang Cuiping screaming, so he raised his hand and slapped her in the face. Bang! The crisp sound echoed in the banquet hall. Then Uncle Deng reached out and grabbed Liu Wei, who was hiding. The guy who dared to insult the head of the family must pay the price. But at this moment, Xiao Meng. An old voice came. Uncle Deng paused immediately, and Jiang Meng turned around and looked towards the stairs. The person who spoke was Jiang Qingshan. After receiving Jiang Meng's call, he couldn't wait to meet Liu Yu, but he didn't expect to see this scene just now. Grandfather. Jiang Meng looked at Jiang Qingshan somewhat unwillingly. Jiang Qingshan's eyes were all on Liu Yu, his look was pious, and he nodded slightly. Liu Yu naturally understood the old man's gaze. Considering Jiang Meng beside him, he left the matter to Jiang Qingshan. At the door, Liu Wei looked at Jiang Qingshan and immediately breathed a sigh of relief, thinking to himself that this old man would not bother with him. But the next second, Liu Jun, I'll give you 3 seconds to get out of here. If you can't keep up with the count for more than 3 seconds, your Liu group will become the mortal enemy of my Jiang family. I, Jiang Qingshan, said this. Jiang Qingshan's voice was cold, and his words made everyone gasp. In the crowd, a middle-aged man's face changed drastically and he ran out in a hurry. Mr. Jiang, there is actually a misunderstanding here. Liu Jun was about to force a smile and explain when he was interrupted by Jiang Qingshan. Apologize. Let your son apologize to Mr. Liu. Liu Jun's face darkened when he heard the voice. His Liu family was also a well-known big family in Yanqing. Now you want your son to apologize to a young boy in public? Aside. The guests around also had complicated expressions, and there was a hint of horror in their eyes as they looked at Liu Yu. What is the origin of this kid? Even if he is the son-in-law of the Jiang family, given Mr. Jiang's character, it is impossible for him to ask Liu Jun to apologize in public. This is almost equivalent to tearing off the relationship. Mr. Jiang, the younger generation. Liu Jun still wanted to fight for it. But all he got in response was a cold snort from Jiang Qingshan. As he raised his hand, a murderous ruthlessness emanated from his body. Everyone who saw Jiang Qingshan's appearance was frightened and their faces changed. They hadn't seen Jiang Qingshan like this for at least 20 or 30 years, the ruthless man who was once so powerful and suppressed the entire Yanqing. Call. Liu Jun gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, turned around and came directly in front of Liu Wei. Dad. Liu Wei called out cautiously. Shut your stinky mouth and apologize, now. Liu Jun slapped Liu Wei in the face, glanced at Zhang Cuiping and Liu Yanran, then grabbed Liu Wei and walked towards Liu Yu. At this time, Liu Wei was completely stunned. When he reacted, he had already arrived in front of Liu Yu and Jiang Meng. You? Just as Liu Wei was about to straighten up, Liu Jun behind him grabbed his arm and pulled hard. On the one hand, there was the pressure from the Jiang family, and on the other hand, there was the angry look from his own father. Finally, Liu Wei gritted his teeth and looked at Liu Yu. Yes, isn't it? Before Liu Wei could finish his words, Jiang Qingshan's voice came again. Kneel down and apologize. As soon as these words came out, Liu Jun's face twitched violently, but he still suppressed his anger and pressed Liu Wei to his knees on the ground. Apologize. Liu Jun scolded. The gaze fell on Liu Yu's face, full of sinisterness. Sorry. Liu Wei lowered his head and spoke through gritted teeth. Looking at Liu Wei kneeling on the ground, Liu Yu did not feel happy at all, and he did not even care at all. On the side, Jiang Meng gestured to Liu Yanran and Zhang Cuiping. And them? Liu Jun turned around and looked at Liu Yanran and Zhang Cuiping without saying a word. Just one glance. Liu Yanran was so frightened that she trembled all over, but she was smart. She had already offended the Jiang family and absolutely could not offend Liu Jun again. So he immediately pulled Zhang Cuiping over. When she came to Liu Yu's side, Liu Yanran deliberately glanced at Liu Yu, but all she got in response was Liu Yu's ignoring gaze. Final. With hatred in her eyes, Liu Yanran knelt on the ground. On the contrary, Zhang Cuiping instinctively wanted to open her mouth to curse, but Liu Jun slapped her in the face, causing her to fall to the ground in a daze. Then the three of them knelt in front of Liu Yu. Liu Yu, what do you see? Jiang Meng had a questioning look in his eyes. That's it. Liu Yu raised his hand indifferently. Hearing this, Liu Jun immediately grabbed Liu Wei and left the Jiang family without looking back. As for Liu Yanran, she lowered her head, supported Zhang Cuiping, and followed behind in embarrassment in front of everyone. In their hall, many guests were talking about it. Hiss. Liu Jun has lost all his face. He forced his son to kneel down and apologize to others. Liu Jun is a ruthless man. I guess he won't give up, right? So what if he's a ruthless person? In front of the Jiang family, he's nothing. It's interesting. The Jiang family has a new son-in-law, and the young master of the Liu group has remarried. The protagonist is still the same person. Hey, you tell me, who on earth is this Liu Yu? How could the Jiang family treat him like this? Chapter 8. The ancestral tomb is passive. Outside the Jiang family manor, Liu Wei kicked and hit the car door frantically as if he was crazy. On the side, Liu Jun had a cold look in his eyes and let his son vent his anger with a cigarette in his mouth. Until Zhang Cuiping and Liu Yanran came over. Fuck you. When Liu Wei saw Zhang Cuiping, he rushed up to her, cursing. You crazy woman, it's all because of your stinky mouth, I'm going to beat you to death. Hey you. Zhang Cuiping was in a daze and didn't see anything clearly before Liu Wei kicked her in the face, completing her hat trick. She fell to the ground without any reaction. Liu Wei. Liu Yanran couldn't help but scold and looked hurriedly at Zhang Cuiping on the ground. Liu Wei was about to take action, but was held down by Liu Jun, who whispered a few words to him. Suddenly, Liu Wei narrowed his eyes, looked at Liu Yanran deeply, but did not attack her. Son, the humiliation that the Jiang family brought upon us tonight will be repaid to them sooner or later with interest, as well as to that brat. He must die. Liu Wei shouted with red eyes without waiting for Liu Jun to finish. I want him to die, with his tendons and bones pulled out, cut into pieces, and tortured for 3 days and 3 nights. Liu Jun nodded when he heard it, and looked back at the Jiang family, as if he was confident of winning. This day is not far away. Inside the Jiang family, the banquet was very lively at this time, and everyone was discussing what happened tonight with great interest. Second floor. Mr. Liu. Jiang Qingshan sat in a wheelchair and excitedly held Liu Yu's hand. Liu Yu glanced at the old man's body, and the weakness beneath his skin was clearly visible. It was obvious that his previous pretense was just for show. Liu Yu didn't understand business. But he could see that the Jiang family really couldn't do without this old man. So much so that he had to entertain dignitaries from all sides as soon as he woke up, which was undoubtedly a declaration to the outside world. The old man just woke up, he needs to rest more. Liu Yu raised his hand and pressed it on Jiang Qingshan's shoulder. A warm current immediately made Jiang Qingshan's face a little redder. Jiang Qingshan naturally noticed this, and looked at Liu Yu with a more pious look. Mr. Liu is in trouble. After saying this, Jiang Qingshan looked at the Jiang family members next to him. The second uncle from before was clearly there, along with a stern-looking middle-aged man and a Chinese woman. Tianfang, Tianhao, Lily, go down and take good care of the guests. Don't be impolite. Xiao Meng, lead the way for Mr. Liu. We are close friends in old age. I want to have a good talk with Mr. Liu. Hearing their voice, Jiang Meng looked at Liu Yu shyly, then pushed the wheelchair towards the elevator. When Liu Yu was about to leave, he glanced at the 3 members of the Liu family. Although the stern-looking man kept his eyes on him with a bit of scrutiny, he was very calm and did not hide anything. As for the second master of the Jiang family, there was a cold light flashing in his eyes. Especially Jiang Qingshan's deliberate act of sending them away made the second master of the Jiang family and the woman have eye contact. It seems that the Jiang family is really unstable. The old man has to send these younger generations away when he talks to me. Liu Yu thought for a moment and his eyes fell on Jiang Meng again. This young girl who is in charge of the Jiang family is obviously in a very difficult situation and is entirely supported by the old man. Soon. Back to that small Chinese courtyard. The calmness on Jiang Qingshan's face faded away, revealing a worried look. During the previous farce involving Zhang Cuiping, Jiang Qingshan had been observing Liu Yu. He couldn't understand this young man who saved him and possessed magical powers. But he noticed one thing. That is, his granddaughter seemed to have some feelings for this young man, and the other party did not refuse. Mr. Liu, I can see that you and Xiao Meng seem to get along well, so I, an old man, am quite direct in my words. Grandpa, what are you talking about? Jiang Meng blushed immediately, and couldn't help looking at Liu Yu, explaining, Mr. Liu, I said you were my fiancé before, it was just because what they said about you was too rude, Looking at Jiang Meng's embarrassed and shy look, Liu Yu curled up a smile. It's okay. I don't mind. As soon as these words came out, Jiang Meng, who was already blushing, her ears turned red and her cheeks were so hot that it seemed like blood was about to drip out. I don't mind this. Does it mean that he doesn't mind what she said before, or does it mean that he doesn't mind that aspect of the development? Jiang Meng clenched her hands tightly, feeling a little overwhelmed for a moment. On the side, looking at the two of them, Jiang Qingshan couldn't help but reveal a look of relief on his face. After all, the Jiang family is now facing internal and external troubles. Although Jiang Meng is capable, she is still too young. At this time, she lacks someone who can suppress everything and serve as her backer. If two people can understand each other, it would be a match made in heaven. While Jiang Qingshan was still thinking, Liu Yu smiled and said straight to the point, Old man, you came to me today to ask about the GU, right? Sure enough, Jiang Qingshan did not hide it and nodded. Things like poisonous insects are too mysterious to us, and this method is hard to guard against, Mr. Liu. Jiang Qingshan paused for a moment and looked at Liu Yu cautiously. You and Xiao Meng are about the same age and you get along well. How about I call you Xiao Liu? Seeing Jiang Qingshan trying to force him and Jiang Meng to get closer, Liu Yu couldn't help but chuckle. Master, you can call me whatever you want. Okay. Jiang Qingshan smiled cheerfully, then a trace of solemnity appeared between his brows, and he asked, Xiao Liu, can you find the specific person who poisoned me? The GU worm originated in the Miao area and is a kind of witchcraft. It is not difficult to obtain the GU, but it is difficult to trace its origin. Liu Yu said thoughtfully. He was not being modest when he said this, but the poison in the old man's body had been there for half a year, and many of the marks had become blurred. Is there no solution at all? Jiang Qingshan asked, obviously facing this kind of threat, he felt uneasy if he didn't get rid of it at the root. There is a way. Liu Yu looked up at the yard, and then looked at the feng shui of the entire Jiang family. In his eyes, golden light appeared in the Jiang family manor. But there was a black line that fell from the sky and ran through the entire feng shui layout of the Jiang family. Liu Yu retracted his gaze and looked at Jiang Qingshan. Do you believe in luck? Jiang Qingshan obviously didn't know how to answer, so he waited for Liu Yu's next words. If your luck is as good as a rainbow, and nothing unexpected happens, your Jiang family will be able to continue its glory for at least another 100 years. But unfortunately, your house is now affected by the evil spirit, and the evil spirit is piercing down, cutting off this luck. Now we can only find the person who cast the curse from the source, that is, the place of destiny. Liu Yu's words have revealed enough information. Really? Jiang Qingshan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. After a long while, he spoke, Xiao Liu, the place of luck you mentioned is the ancestral tomb of my Jiang family. Chapter 9, The Unlucky Star. Right. Liu Yu nodded. The place of fortune refers to the Jiang family's ancestral tomb. Since he entered the Jiang family before, Liu Yu had seen that the Jiang family's fortune was very prosperous. The word luck. For people, nothing is better than gathering the benefits of local feng shui. Those who have good luck are immune to all kinds of attacks, all evils stay away from them, and they have great fortune and luck, and can do anything. The reason why the Jiang family's fortune is so strong is obviously that they have occupied some kind of blessed land from the root. In other words, the ancestral tomb must be a feng shui treasure land. But now you have committed the evil of conflicting yin, your luck has collapsed, and the entire feng shui structure has been nailed down. The person who put the poison on you is most likely going to start with your ancestral grave. It really is the ancestral tomb. Jiang Qingshan looked at Liu Yu with complicated eyes, hesitant and suddenly enlightened. Liu Yu naturally saw the look in Jiang Qingshan's eyes. Is there anything I can't tell you about? On the side, Jiang Meng looked at Jiang Qingshan anxiously. It was already this late, could it be that Grandpa still didn't believe Liu Yu? It's not that I can't tell you, it's just that the ancestral grave site is indeed the biggest secret of my Jiang family. Jiang Qingshan thought for a moment and sighed. The biggest reason my ancestors moved to Yanqing from the north was because they discovered a great feng shui treasure land. It has been passed down for generations, and only direct descendants know the exact location. As he spoke, Jiang Qingshan's expression became even uglier. If there really was something wrong with the ancestral grave, combined with what Liu Yu said, it was obviously someone from the Jiang family who had brought the guy who had put the poison to the ancestral tomb, with the goal of harming him. Thinking of this, Jiang Qingshan even gasped violently due to anger. Seeing this, Liu Yu didn't say anything, just watched Jiang Meng comfort Jiang Qingshan. After all, he is an outsider. Even if he wants to help the Jiang family members have to be willing to do so. For a long time. Xiaolu, I'm sorry to make you laugh. Jiang Qingshan recovered and gave Liu Yu a bitter smile. Fine. Liu Yu shook his head slightly. Jiang Qingshan seemed to have accepted his fate. He put his hand on Liu Yu's arm, with a pleading look in his eyes. Xiaolu, the ancestral tomb of my Jiang family is in Longwu Mountain. Please take the trouble to make the trip. Make sure to catch the person who cast the poison. As for the others, Jiang Qingshan paused, sighed and shook his head. At least make sure the Jiang family's foundation is not shaken. At this moment, Liu Yu could clearly see the struggle on Jiang Qingshan's face, but in the end he couldn't bear to find the traitor of the Jiang family. Or maybe the old man has the answer in his mind. But all this is not important to Liu Yu. Understood. Liu Yu took his hand back, and seeing Jiang Qingshan's pale face, he said, "Goodbye, old man, you are old, and there are endless things to do. Take a rest." After saying that, Liu Yu walked out the door. Jiang Meng subconsciously wanted to stand up, but Liu Yu waved his hand to refuse. Original place. Xiao Meng, what do you think of Master Lu Qian? Jiang Qingshan took Jiang Meng's hand and suddenly asked in a low voice. Jiang Meng just withdrew his gaze, and when he heard Jiang Qingshan's words, he was stunned for a moment, stamped his feet and said shyly, "Grandpa, what are you thinking about? Master Lu and I have only known each other for a short time." Seeing that Jiang Meng was a little anxious, Jiang Qingshan smiled and didn't continue the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The little girl is shy. Okay, Grandpa won't ask any more questions, but this Master Lu is an opportunity that cannot be missed, especially for the Jiang family. Listening to Jiang Qingshan's meaningful words, Jiang Meng naturally understood what he meant, but she still felt more shy. After all, she had to admit it. Master Lu Qian, you are really good. At this time, Jiang Qingshan suddenly remembered something. Xiao Meng, Master Lu Qian helped our Jiang family this time. What conditions did he put forward? Jiang Meng recalled what he heard and slowly reacted. Master Lu didn't seem to mention any conditions. As he spoke, Jiang Meng's expression suddenly became nervous. Grandpa, have we been impolite? I was so busy that I didn't even think about it. Just now you asked someone to go to our ancestral grave to help us investigate. Hearing this, Jiang Qingshan was slightly stunned. He thought Jiang Meng had already negotiated the terms with Liu Yu. But now it seems that Master Lu Qian didn't mention any benefits at all. Jiang Qingshan's thoughts were working rapidly. Finally, his eyes fell on Jiang Meng and a smile appeared on his face. It's okay. It's rude, and it's a good thing. If Master Lu doesn't mention it, then don't ask. Jiang Meng was confused after hearing this. She hesitated several times and couldn't help but retort. Grandpa, how can this be okay? Master Lu didn't mention any good things. In the future, our Jiang family will owe Master Lu more and more. If we become enemies one day, what can we use to repay Master Lu? Hearing this, Jiang Qingshan looked at Jiang Meng meaningfully, which made Jiang Meng feel uncomfortable. Grandfather. Jiang Meng stamped her feet and looked at Jiang Qingshan coquettishly. Har ha har ha, these are all good things. The more we owe, the closer our relationship with Master Lu is. If we ever become enemies, the worst that can happen is that I can give him my granddaughter as compensation. Jiang Qingshan laughed loudly, but his tone was extremely serious. Jiang Meng didn't react for a while, but when she finally figured it out, her face turned red as if blood was about to drip out. How could a grandfather sell his granddaughter like this? But if I sell it to Master Liu, it doesn't seem impossible. The other side. Liu Yu arrived outside the Jiang family. He took a step that covered dozens of meters, leaving a trail of afterimages under the night sky. He has achieved the purpose of this trip. After he rescued Jiang Qingshan, this matter essentially had nothing to do with him. But the reason why I still came to the Jiang family. On the one hand, it is Jiang Meng's sincerity. On the other hand, there is the Miao people who crossed the border. Yanqing was once the only secular base of Tianmen, even though there had been no successors stationed there for several generations. But the majesty of the word Tianmen is not something that a mere Miajiang Jiu master dares to challenge. Longwu Mountain. Liu Yu raised his hand and counted with 3 fingers, and a murderous look suddenly flashed in his eyes as he looked into the distance. Soon. Return to Tianmen Old House. Liu Yu subconsciously glanced at the gate. I saw a black line moving quickly on the door. When Liu Yu looked over, the black line reacted. But it had no ill will towards him, it was just wandering around on its own, but just by swimming around, it was emitting a tremendous amount of hostility. There is a god above your head. You don't have to be afraid of him, but you must never be disrespectful. Liu Yu stared at the black line for several times. This was caused by the stone kicked by Liu Wei before. Open the gate. Just as Liu Yu was about to step in, he suddenly discovered a face as handsome as Zhang Fei sleeping on the ground. This rough-looking man, who was about 20 years old and of strong build, was sleeping soundly right under the doorstep. Liu Yu also reacted quickly, narrowly withdrawing his foot and scolding in annoyance. Why not? On the ground. The sturdy man was startled by Liu Yu's roar and slowly opened his sleepy eyes. What's going on? Chapter 10. Why bother? Why did you steal Aunt Zhang's panties? Why not? Who asked you to come in? Get out. Liu Yu pointed outside the door unhappily. Ordinary people would certainly feel embarrassed to stay there any longer after hearing such impatient scolding. But on the ground, the man called he by just touched his head foolishly, then looked up at Liu Yu angrily. Where there is a door, there is a way. I came in, so I don't need anyone's consent. Besides, this door opened with just a push. I'm not going out. After saying that, Hebi lay on the ground again. Seeing he by closing his eyes without caring about anything, Liu Yu couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth, but his eyes revealed an indescribable solemnity. The burly man on the ground. He found it 2 years ago on a parked chair outside the station when he was coming down the mountain from Tianmen. At that time, Liu Yu could see at a glance the terrifying evil aura on Hebi that was like the abyss. After realizing this, Liu Yu's first reaction was to draw his sword and chop this guy to death. After all, this is such a murderous aura. Even if an ordinary person commits many evil deeds and harms countless people, it is impossible for him to accumulate evil. There is only one explanation. This is a person who was extremely evil in his previous life or even in many previous lives. Even if he was cursed by God after his death and fell into reincarnation, he could not wash away that evil. And this kind of people have a name that is known to the public. Unlucky star. It's an absolute curse, anyone who comes into contact with it will have no good ending. But for the people of Tianmen, people with this kind of fate are often the most unstable factors in the world. Killing them quickly is not only in line with Tianmen's responsibility, but also in line with God's will. But perhaps it was because he had just experienced the death of his master, and the danger of the tribulation he was going to face was unknown. So Liu Yu spared Hebi's life and brought him back to the Tianmen old house. He was on guard so that if anything unusual happened, he could take action immediately. Now 2 years have passed in a flash, and Hebi has been living an honest life around the old house, which does not give Liu Yu any reason to take action. The only thing to say. It's this guy, so shameless. Why bother? Stop playing tricks on me and get up. Liu Yu withdrew his thoughts and shouted to Hebi who was lying on the ground. But Hebi pretended not to hear it, put his hands behind his head and shook his head deliberately. Call. Liu Yu raised his hand and pinched his eyebrows. Okay, I don't want you to leave. Get up first. Liu Yu said helplessly, and added, it's okay to push the door into the yard, but next time don't lie under the threshold. What a shame. Hearing their voice, Hebby stood up, but when he heard the next sentence, he pouted again. I'd love to. After saying that, Hebby swaggered into the yard and sat down on the steps. Original place. Liu Yu looked at this guy Hebai and couldn't help but frown. When Hebai first came to the Qianmen old house 2 years ago, the power of incense had already been activated from more than 10 meters away, completely suppressing Hebai. At that time, Hebai was almost crushed to death by the power of the incense. But now, Hebai has already entered the yard without any impact. It doesn't mean that the power of incense has lost its effect. But why bother with the evil spirit on your body? It's like you've learned how to get along with incense. Weird, absurd, this guy's evil spirit. Liu Yu stared at Hebai's back with hesitation in his eyes, but finally shook his head. I just hope it doesn't come to that. Liu Yu strode into the yard. Hebai next to him stared at Liu Yu, rubbing his hands, with an expectant expression on his face. Quite a while. Under the moonlight, Liu Yu brought 2 bowls of noodles and placed 1 bowl in front of Hebai. Hey, it smells good. Your cooking skills are getting better and better. It's a pity that you make me feel disgusted again. Why did he hold the noodles in his hands, eat them, and gesture at Liu Yu from a distance? Liu Yu, who was about to eat noodles, frowned when he heard the voice and turned to look at Hebai. What do you mean by hate? He ate the noodles with big mouthfuls, didn't answer, but looked Liu Yu up and down for a long time before speaking. I can't explain it. It's just like when we met 2 years ago. There's something wrong with you. It's scary. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Hearing Hebai's words, Liu Yu's heart was already filled with huge waves. After marrying Liu Yanran, he fell into a calamity and became immortal, and his cultivation gradually disappeared. Now the disaster has been resolved. Obviously, what Hebby was talking about was his cultivation. Can you really feel it? Liu Yu frowned and looked at Hebai, his eyes flickering. But he nodded carelessly, as if he didn't notice Liu Yu's gaze. I feel it so truly, but don't worry, I won't bully you. I know you're really good to me, and I only bully other people who have bad hearts. Why bother to speak word by word? Your language seems so childish. But Liu Yu was the first to notice that when Hebai was speaking, the black gas on his body exploded several meters high like a blower blowing flour. Moreover, the evil spirit was so strong that even the old house in Qianmen reacted faintly. At this time, Crazy He, get out here! A shout came from outside the door. Liu Yu turned his head subconsciously, and Hebai seemed to know him, put down the bowl and rushed out. When I arrived at the door, I saw an old lady standing there with her hands on her hips, looking angry. Aunt Zhang. Liu Yu looked at the other person and shouted in confusion. When Aunt Zhang, who was full of anger, saw Liu Yu, her anger disappeared and she bowed. Oh, Xiaolu, I didn't know you were here. Sorry for offending me. I'm going to find that crazy he. He stole my pants. Liu Yu widened his eyes and turned to look at Hebai beside him. Hebai looked at Aunt Zhang angrily, but did not refute what was said. Instead, he nodded. It's just a pair of shorts, and you came to ask for it in the middle of the night. Aren't you ashamed? Hearing this, Aunt Zhang's face turned red with anger. She pointed at Hebai with her hand shaking constantly, and finally she whimpered. Crazy he, just wait, I'll get someone to take care of you. Seeing this, Liu Yu grabbed Aunt Zhang and tried to comfort her. Aunt, what's going on? Tell me. Why do you have to get into trouble? I'll clean it up. Aunt Zhang glanced at Liu Yu, and her eyes became kinder. In the past 2 years, Liu Yu has been in the Qianmen old house, occasionally helping people tell fortunes and cure illnesses. In addition, the older generation all know the rumors about the Qianmen old house, so they are naturally in awe of Liu Yu. Xiaolu, oh, this is so embarrassing, you have to take care of him, he is a lunatic. Aunt Zhang didn't say much. She pointed at Hebai and cursed him a few times, then turned and left. After Aunt Zhang disappeared. Why, what's going on? Liu Yu looked at Hebai coldly, and his low tone made Hebai shrink his neck in fear. After all, he could still tell whether Liu Yu was angry or not, and he stammered as he explained, I had a fight with someone, and I didn't win, so I wanted to find something to cover his head with. Liu Yu frowned when he heard this. He was destined to be unlucky. Once he became ruthless, someone would definitely die. Who are you fighting with? Also, why do you cover your head? Hebi grinned when he heard the voice, raised his hand and pointed into the distance. Liu Yu turned his head and looked in confusion. It's hard to explain, it's right there, the god tablet under the old tree. Hebi scratched his head. Liu Yu took a closer look and was stunned, muttering. Land god. Hey. Hebi just smiled naively, as if he had not lost face. Liu Yu took a deep breath and was about to speak when he suddenly reacted. You used Aunt Zhang's underpants to deceive the land god. Chapter 11 Divination. Not long. Liu Yu stood under a thick old locust tree. At this time, on the stone platform under the tree, there were incense burners and some candles for worship. The object of worship was a statue of the land god. The night breeze is blowing gently. Boom! When Liu Yu raised his hand, a golden light shot up into the sky from his body, and then he formed a seal with 3 fingers and tapped their forehead. Old Immortal, my friend is naughty and has offended many people. I am here to apologize on his behalf. Liu Yu's voice was low and ethereal. Crash! The shadows of the trees swayed, and the old locust tree seemed to sense Liu Yu's intention, but did not appreciate it. A gust of night wind blew, rolling up countless fallen leaves and blowing towards Liu Yu. Liu Yu narrowed his eyes and looked at the old locust tree helplessly. And at this time, Hebi suddenly stuck his head out, put his hands on his hips and started cursing at the land god. Fuck, you old bastard, my brother has already apologized to you in person, what else do you want? Don't go too far. Aside. Liu Yu frowned when he heard the voice, turned around and slapped Hebi on the shoulder. Shut up. After scolding, Liu Yu bowed slightly to the land god, then dragged Hebi away. Behind. The branches of the old locust tree kept shaking, like an angry old man, pointing to the sky and cursing. Liu Yu also noticed it and couldn't help but slap Hebi. God of Land. In the past, only when all living things attained enlightenment could they be entrusted with the mission of guarding and protecting an area and accumulating merits at the same time. And now is the Dharma ending age. The existence of the land god is naturally simply a kind of imperial manifestation. Although his duty is still to guard an area, he is not even considered a living being. It exists only because of the daily incense offerings. Once the incense is no longer burning one day, the so-called land god will naturally disappear quietly. Look at you. You can wander around randomly on weekdays, but you have to be careful about those who should not be provoked. You dare to provoke the land god. Liu Yu glared at Hebi helplessly. But this guy was shameless. Liu Yu grabbed his collar and tilted his head with a happy expression on his face. You. Liu Yu sighed. At this moment, Hebi seemed to suddenly remember something, and he shook his neck and broke free from Liu Yu's hand. I have to go out for a while. Please save some food for me tomorrow. I won't be back until the afternoon. Why bother shouting while rolling up your sleeves and running away? Leave a fart. Liu Yu scolded angrily. And Hebi turned around and gave Liu Yu a raised eyebrow expression. You certainly wouldn't want to starve me. After saying that, Hebi ran away in a few steps. What Liu Yu saw was a black gas rushing towards the distance. What was this guy's origin in his previous life? Liu Yu withdrew his gaze, finally shook his head, and returned to the old house. Why bother? The reason why he had stayed in the old house for the past 2 years was to be alert to this unstable factor, but if you think about it carefully, he did take care of this guy's 3 meals a day. Although I don't want to admit it. But Liu Yu really treated him as a friend. The next morning, Liu Yu pushed open the gate and saw Jiang Meng standing at the door. He was wearing casual clothes and a baseball cap, looking very youthful. And as she raised her head, that breathtakingly beautiful face that needs no makeup still makes people's hearts tremble. Coming. Liu Yu smiled and spoke. Jiang Meng nodded obediently, then pointed at the car at the entrance of the alley and said in a low voice, the ancestral tomb is of great importance. Grandpa means that the fewer people go, the better, so he asked me to drive with you. 2 people are enough, let's go. Liu Yu closed the gate and walked towards the alley. Looking at Liu Yu's back, and thinking that it would be just the 2 of them on the road from now on, Jiang Meng couldn't help but blushing, and followed him with brisk steps. After the 2 got in the car, they drove straight towards the suburbs. At the same time, on the road across the alley, a pair of eyes were staring at Jiang Meng's car as it left. Master, they are out. There are only 2 of them. We don't know where they are going. Inside the Jinbei car, a man wearing sunglasses spoke on the phone. Follow him. If there is a chance, just. Their voice on the phone didn't say any specific words, but the cold murderous intent was already coming out of the receiver. Inside the car, the man's expression didn't change at all, and he nodded almost without hesitation. Yes. As the phone call ended, the man picked up the intercom in the car and rushed out with his foot on the accelerator. In an instant, 7 or 8 more cars rushed out from both sides of the road, following the Jinbei in the lead, and quickly chased after Jiang Meng's car. The other side. Liu Yu was sitting in the co-pilot seat, holding an ancient copper coin in his hand, gently rotating it on his finger bones. Liu Yu, is this some kind of magical trick? Jiang Meng asked with a glance, with undisguised curiosity in his eyes. Hearing the sound, Liu Yu raised his finger and the copper coin jumped high into the air and landed in his palm. It's not that profound, just some Fushi divination to predict good and bad fortune. Hearing Liu Yu's words, Jiang Meng's eyes couldn't help but widen. Isn't this considered a magical method? Then you calculate, will we be successful this time? Jiang Meng blinked her beautiful eyes at Liu Yu, as if she wanted to deliberately consider him. Looking at Jiang Meng's cute expression, Liu Yu smiled silently, then shook his fingertips lightly, and the coin jumped high again. Jiang Meng's eyes also jumped along with the copper coin, and then he saw the copper coin standing strangely in Liu Yu's palm. It is neither biased nor tilted, and is completely upright. What does this mean? Jiang Meng asked hurriedly. Liu Yu stared at the copper coin, smiled slightly, and closed his palm. The result of divination is entirely up to their heart. Liu Yu leaned back in his seat with his head raised, glancing back through the rearview mirror. A sharp gleam flashed in his eyes, but his face showed no concern at all. To put it simply, the outcome depends entirely on my mood. As long as I want, my journey will go smoothly. Listening to the pride in Liu Yu's words, Jiang Meng's first reaction was to agree, especially when she saw Liu Yu's calm expression, as if everything was under control. As the vehicle continues to move. Not long. On the outskirts of Yanqing, among the mountains, Liu Yu and Jiang Meng had been walking for more than half an hour, and no vehicles could come in. It was not until we passed through a dense forest that the view suddenly opened up. In the open space among the mountains stood a small hill, only 20 to 30 meters high, which stood out among the mountains. That's it. Jiang Meng pulled at his sweat-soaked clothes and pointed at the hill. As early as when Liu Yu entered the mountain, he had sensed the spiritual energy gathering from all around. It seems that your Jiang family has picked up a great opportunity. Liu Yu looked around and murmured in a low voice, the wind rises from the southeast, gathering blessings, and the mountains are all gathered together. In terms of feng shui, this is a typical Fulong situation. Chapter 12, The Dragon's Game. The Fulong Game. Jiang Meng heard Liu Yu's murmurs and gave him a questioning look. Liu Yu nodded and explained to Jiang Meng. The so-called Fulong situation is to gather the spiritual charm of the surroundings into one place. If you master this feng shui pattern, the sharper you act, the more blessings you will have. Your Jiang family made its fortune in Yanqing, and I'm afraid it has never been stable, but it is also in this process that it has become stronger and stronger. Hearing this, Jiang Meng recalled carefully, and then couldn't help but nodded vigorously. There was also a bit more admiration and disbelief in the look he gave Liu Yu. Everything Liu Yu said was right. Her Jiang family has been in Yanqing for 200 years, and their rise to wealth is a bloody history of battles. In the face of such gains, the Jiang family also suffered huge losses. Aside, Liu Yu saw that Jiang Meng looked unhappy, as if she was remembering something sad, and he immediately understood. The Fulong situation is a first-class feng shui treasure land. But for ordinary people, the situation of Fulong is not the best, and it is even a mixed bag of good and bad. The reason is the 2 words, Fulong. What is ambush? It is suppression. To suppress the dragons, you have the monopoly of spiritual charm. Not only do you enjoy the blessings, but you also have to endure the backlash of suppressing the dragons. When he saw Jiang Qingshan before, he calculated from his face that Jiang Qingshan had at least 7 or 8 children, but he only saw 3. Jiang Meng is the young head of the family, and it is obvious that her parents are no longer around. And this is the backlash of the Fulong situation. Of course, if we want to talk about who can truly benefit from the Fu Long situation, the best candidate is the monk, because the monk can completely ignore the backlash. Okay, let's go. Liu Yu reached out and patted the depressed Jiang Meng, and looked back before leaving. Jiang Meng didn't notice Liu Yu's gaze. She raised her head, wiped the corners of her eyes, and went up the mountain with Liu Yu. At this time, the mountain road was covered with thorns, and the dense thorns were entangled with each other. Slower. Liu Yu raised his hand and waved it, mobilizing the internal energy in his body to create a path in front of him. Jiang Meng hid behind Liu Yu with a red face, waiting to pass through the dense vegetation. The two reached the top of the mountain and saw the location of the Jiang family's ancestral tomb. It has a mountain behind it and a wide open space. There is a green dragon on the left and a white tiger on the right, forming a perfect shape for a throne. In addition, there is a jade belt of water flowing slowly on the open ground. If you bury your ancestors in a feng shui treasure land like Fu Longju, your descendants will either be rich or noble. This is Longwu Mountain, my family's ancestral tomb. After Jiang Meng finished speaking, he knelt in front of the tomb and kowtowed respectfully. Liu Yu closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and the abundant spiritual energy around him made him feel as if every pore in his body was opened. It's a great place. Liu Yu opened his eyes with emotion and looked around. After all, he came here this time to find the guy who cast the curse. After taking a quick look around, his eyes finally fell on the tombstone that recorded the names of Jiang family ancestors. At this time, Jiang Meng on the side had finished bowing and stood up to look at Liu Yu. How is it, did you find anything? Seeing the inquiry in Jiang Meng's eyes, Liu Yu said nothing and lowered his head to observe the stone tablet in front of him. No wonder there was no sign when your grandfather was poisoned. It turns out someone broke his acupoints. Liu Yu raised his hand and pressed it on the stone tablet. Then, in Jiang Meng's shocked eyes, Liu Yu suddenly grabbed the stone tablet and moved it half a meter away, and under the exposed ground, there was actually a piece of steel drill stuck in it. This. Jiang Meng saw the steel drill at a glance. What was even more incredible was that there seemed to be something buried next to the steel drill, pressed down by the stone tablet. Yes, it's my grandfather's clothes. Jiang Meng took a closer look, bent down and turned over the soil, and the thing was actually a mar. Breaking the acupuncture points disrupts the luck, and then using clothes as a medium to cast a curse is a method used by the Miao people. Liu Yu was not surprised and spoke softly. At this time, Jiang Meng patted the dirt off his clothes, and his face had turned cold. Liu Yu, can you find the person who put the poison on me? Don't worry, it's not difficult to find him. Liu Yu shook his head slightly and raised his hand and pressed it into the soil. Next second. Boom! A sharp sound was clearly heard. Liu Yu was seen holding the steel drill and pulling it out little by little. On the side, Jiang Meng couldn't help but cover her ears, with an uncomfortable expression on her face. The reason was a silent wailing that suddenly sounded in her ears. She couldn't hear it, but it reached her heart, carrying with it tremendous anger and ferocity. At this time, Liu Yu was pulling the steel drill, but it seemed that he encountered a strong resistance. He dragged the steel drill tightly, preventing Liu Yu from pulling it out. Dragon. Liu Yu smiled and looked down at his feet. The situation of Fu Long was predestined by heaven. Now someone comes to break the cave, which is what you want. Don't you want to be suppressed any longer? Liu Yu's smile grew bigger and bigger, and in the end, he almost revealed a creepy murderous aura. It seems that the people of Tianmen are targeting guys like you. I'm giving you a chance. If you are dissatisfied with the will of heaven, then go against it. Don't act so presumptuous in front of me. If you refuse to change your ways. Liu Yu's voice suddenly sank, and a violent aura swept through his body. How about I just chop you all up one by one and consider it a good deed to help you get rid of it? Under Liu Yu's roar. In an instant, the invisible force on the steel drill suddenly disappeared, as if it had never appeared from the beginning to the end. At the same time, Jiang Meng also took a deep breath and looked around with fear in his eyes. It seems you are still reluctant to let go. Liu Yu smiled slightly, without any surprise in his eyes. The feng shui pattern is determined by heaven, and naturally there are some elements in it, such as the force just now. But in the face of life and death, apparently even the manifestation of the power of heaven and earth knows how to choose. After pulling out the steel drill, which was nearly 2 meters long, Liu Yu threw it aside. Liu Yu, what just happened was. Jiang Meng looked at Liu Yu in shock and couldn't help but touch his chest. It's okay. The problem with the ancestral tomb has been solved. The fortune of your Jiang family should be restored soon. Liu Yu raised his hand and transmitted a gentle force into Jiang Meng's body. He then turned his head and looked around. Let's go find the guy who cast the curse. He should. Liu Yu looked around and finally looked at a tree in the southeast corner. Next second. Cool. Liu Yu kicked a stone and hit it against the tree. What was strange was that a pool of blood suddenly exploded on the pierced tree. It's here indeed. At the same time, in a cave in the southeast corner of Longwu Mountain. Puff. A skinny man suddenly raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood, with a look of horror in his eyes. He is indeed a master. The skinny man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a hint of ruthlessness slowly emerged in his frightened eyes, as if he was not at all surprised by Liu Yu's arrival. So what if he's an expert? I'll kill an expert. The skinny man seemed to be fully prepared and looked into the depths of the cave. Chapter 13 Meow Territory Insect Control. Call. Accompanied by a whistling wind. The black robe was lifted up, and the thin man's figure flashed by. Immediately. Ding-ling-ling. The sound of a clear bell rang out from deep in the cave. The other side. Liu Yu came to the big tree, and Jiang Meng next to him took a look and immediately covered his mouth. I saw that the bloodstain on the tree was actually a bunch of flesh worms, which looked like maggots. Most of them had been turned into meat paste by the stones. But some are still hanging on the tree trunks. This is also Jiu. Liu Yu patted Jiang Meng on the back and began to explain. Miaojiang was once the place where witchcraft originated. Later, the world changed and two sects evolved. One sect was witches, who practiced the art of incantation. The other school is Jiu, which uses the countless poisonous insects in the 100,000 mountains of Miaojiang in combination with secret methods. Some of these insects are visible to the naked eye, while others are so tiny that they cannot be detected. They have different uses. When Liu Yu said this, he also mentioned Jiang Qingshan. The poisonous insect in your grandfather's body before, if you are not an expert, you can't even confirm whether it exists. Jiang Meng subconsciously hid behind Liu Yu when she heard the voice, obviously afraid that the fleshworms would crawl onto her body. Liu Yu, the person who cast the poison. Liu Yu lowered his head and picked up a fleshworm, crushed it with his fingers, and waited for the moment when the fleshworm burst into blood. Ong. Liu Yu twisted his fingers as if he had caught something. What Jiang Meng saw was that Liu Yu's fingertips seemed to be holding some blood mist. To get started with Miaojiang insect control, you must first raise a mother Jiu to nourish in your heart, and the Jiu you want to use must also be raised in your body. Generally, those who can be called Jiu masters have at least hundreds of Jiu worms in their bodies, so to put it simply, a Jiu master is a living nutrition capsule that feeds these Jiu worms with blood on a daily basis. So this blood belongs to that guy. Liu Yu raised his hand, a golden light flashed in his eyes, and he formed a seal with one hand. Kori Miayin, go. As Liu Yu raised his hand, a blood mist invisible to ordinary people shot out from his fingertips, leaving a red line that lingered in the air for a long time. Let's go. Liu Yu took Jiang Meng's hand and walked towards the blood line. Aside. When Liu Yu held Jiang Meng's hand, her pretty face turned red subconsciously, but at this moment there was more calmness and curiosity in her eyes. Liu Yu, you said that the Jiu master has so many insects in his body, so shouldn't they have been eaten up? But I've seen it in a movie, isn't it the kind that when you take something out, the surrounding birds and insects will be attracted? Without waiting for Jiang Meng to finish speaking, Liu Yu couldn't help but turn around and look at Jiang Meng with a smile. Jiang Meng looked at him with a look of discomfort and said hesitantly. What's wrong? Liu Yu smiled and shook his head, saying patiently. You said it was a movie. If a Jiu master needs external objects to remove the Jiu, then they are inferior. At least it's impossible for that kind of guy to cast a Jiu on your grandfather from a distance. After Liu Yu finished speaking, he pulled Jiang Meng and sped up. Behind him, Jiang Meng was holding his hand, holding her breath slightly, her face flushed with shyness. Soon. Walk down Longwu Mountain. Looking at the endless blood line suspended in the air. This guy is hiding so far away. Liu Yu frowned slightly, his sixth sense told him that things didn't seem that simple. What's wrong? Jiang Meng asked puzzledly. Fine. Liu Yu shook his head. Just like what happened in the car before, ever since he broke through his state of mind, in a sense, he was only one step away from reaching the realm of the Taoist Great Master. But even though he was only a heavenly master, he was still at the very top of the Dharma ending age. At this point, he is very confident. Therefore, no matter what happens, it is not worth mentioning in his eyes. Let's go and see if it's the same as what I thought. If it is, it will be interesting. Liu Yu smiled meaningfully, and at the same time thought of the dozens of people who followed behind them when Jiang was driving. Those people followed us all their way to the entrance of the mountain with great force. But he did not follow to Longwu Mountain. Liu Yu was a little confused before, but now seeing that the tracking traces have not changed at all, it seems as if the GU master is waiting for him. Combining the information together, Liu Yu couldn't help but feel a little strange in his eyes. Is this GU master still trying to trick me? On the side, Jiang Meng looked at Liu Yu's expression and couldn't help but become nervous. But the next second. Walk. Liu Yu suddenly became excited and put his arm around Jiang Meng's waist. Why? Jiang Meng was startled, but then she covered her eyes and screamed. Liu Yu held her in his arms and rushed out 7 or 8 meters in one step. His speed was so fast that Jiang Meng couldn't open her eyes. Blink. Less than 2 minutes. Outside a village built halfway up a mountain. Liu Yu and Jiang Meng climbed over the mountain and came to the end of the village. Looking down, they could still see the road at the foot of the mountain. Call. Jiang Meng opened her eyes in shock, and then stared at Liu Yu blankly. What's wrong? Liu Yu said with a smile. Jiang Meng hurriedly shook her head, turned her head and let out a long breath, but she couldn't help but secretly look at Liu Yu from the corner of her eye. When she had come into contact with Liu Yu before, she was more impressed by Liu Yu's extraordinary and leisurely temperament. But just at that moment, she finally felt Liu Yu's wildness. Is that GU master hiding in this village? Jiang Meng asked after calming down his breathing. Liu Yu's answer was to take her and walk straight towards the village. Jiang Meng wanted to continue asking, but seeing Liu Yu's increasingly solemn look, she sensibly stopped talking. As the two of them entered the village, gradually, a hint of nervousness appeared on Jiang Meng's face. Looking at the empty village, she subconsciously tightened Liu Yu's hand. Liu Yu, this is a bit strange. The village is so quiet. It's clearly noon, so at least someone should be cooking. But now. Jiang Meng pointed around and seemed to not know how to describe what to say next. But Liu Yu seemed to have seen through everything. He didn't say anything and just pulled Jiang Meng forward step by step. That look seemed like a deliberate provocation. The other side. Inside the cave. Ding-ling-ling. The crisp ringing sound rises and falls. I saw a skinny man doing a strange dance, and the tinkling sound came from under the black robe. At the same time, there were 7 strange mud nests placed around the cave, and it seemed as if there were some living creatures inside that were vibrating with the sound of the bell. He. You walked right into my trap without even realizing it. I guess I overestimated you. The skinny man's voice was hoarse and sharp, and under the wide brim of his hat, a pair of eyes full of excitement and hunting were revealed. Prepare to die. The skinny man waved his hands, revealing his arms full of holes, and the ringing sounds came from these holes. Next second, 7 mud nests exploded, raising a cloud of black mist and flying towards the village. A closer look at the black fog reveals that it is made up of densely packed flying insects. Chapter 14, Flying GU disrupts the village. In the mountain village, Liu Yu strolled on the dirt road, his perception gradually spreading out. In his eyes, the entire scene of the village was completely captured. But the GU master is not here. On the contrary, the bloodline also split into countless strands here, and only one strand was heading towards the distant hillside. Obviously, the GU master should be in that direction. And here, there is a high probability that this is a trap set by the GU master to deal with him. Suddenly, a scream was heard. Liu Yu turned his head and saw Jiang Meng pushing open the door of an old courtyard and found an old man lying in the yard. Liu Yu, come quickly, there is an old man who fainted. Jiang Meng shouted and hurried to help the old man up. But at this time, don't touch him, Liu Yu said in a deep voice. Jiang Meng was stunned when he heard the voice, but his hand was already on the old man. It was just this simple touch. The old man on the ground suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a pair of cloudy eyes. His whole body kept shaking, his hands began to wave unconsciously, and he even grabbed Jiang Meng. Jiang Meng was startled, and when she came to her senses, she quickly shook off the old man's hand and hid behind Liu Yu. What is he doing? Insanity. Liu Yu looked solemn and raised his hand to hold down the struggling old man. From the moment he arrived at the village, he noticed that there were dozens of people in the village. The strange thing was that the conditions of these people were not right, and there was a breath hidden in their bodies that did not belong to them. Therefore, there is only one explanation for everything. These villagers have been bewitched. As expected, Liu Yu perceived that there was a living creature inside the old man on the ground. Looking at Jiang Meng's nervous and worried expression, Liu Yu spoke. All these villagers have been poisoned in advance. Obviously, that guy knows where we are and that we are targeting him. This is what he arranged in advance to deal with me. Hearing this, Jiang Meng also understood something from the words. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Then can you save him?" "It's not difficult to save people." Liu Yu nodded affirmatively and looked around. "It's just that there are so many villagers now, and the methods used by the GU worms are very strange, so no one knows." Halfway through his words, Liu Yu suddenly raised his head and squinted his eyes. "Here it comes." Jiang Meng was confused by Liu Yu's words and looked up subconsciously. But of course she couldn't see anything. But in Liu Yu's eyes, he saw a group of poisonous insects like black mist falling all over the village. Some of them fell around Liu Yu. Looking down, he saw a black mist flowing into the old man's nasal cavity. Next second, the old man, who was struggling unconsciously like a zombie, had bloodshot eyes, screams coming out of his mouth, and his strength seemed to have increased countless times. It was as if the flying poisonous insect had merged with the poisonous insect in the old man's body, controlling the old man and causing him to go crazy. This is. Jiang Meng was shocked by the change in the old man. Liu Yu, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. These villagers were obviously the ones that guy was using to deal with him. He had no fear of this. But what I am afraid of is that the poisonous insects will take the lives of these innocent villagers. No matter how much he despised the GU master, the premise was that the GU master's methods were only used against him. Otherwise, based on the strangeness of the poisonous insect, even he might not be able to kill all the villagers. After all, there are just too many people. Moreover, the lives of ordinary people are too fragile. However, judging from the current situation, Liu Yu can finally rest assured. This poisonous insect can obviously make people go into a violent state, like a mad beast. Jiang Meng. Liu Yu shouted in a low voice and hit the old man in the heart with his palm. Under the force, those poisonous insects were killed directly by Liu Yu's palm, and the old man's body suddenly became quiet, lying on the ground without moving. "Stay in the yard and don't move. Lock the door and don't go out before I come," Liu Yu said, stood up and rushed out of the yard, while locking the door tightly. Original place. Jiang Meng couldn't help but run to the door and look out through the crack. But the next second, woo! Jiang Meng covered her mouth with her hand and stepped back in fear. Suddenly, several crazy figures rushed onto the dirt road outside the yard. In the blink of an eye, the number of people increased to hundreds. Judging from the way these people are dressed, they are all villagers. There were men, women, young and old, even children of a few years old. But if you look closely, you can see that their eyes are bloodshot, and they are roaring unconsciously. They rush onto the road with their teeth and claws bared, which is particularly creepy. Jiang Meng was so frightened by this horrifying scene that she pursed her lips tightly, but at the same time she also noticed something strange. That is, these crazy people did not attack each other, but instead gathered together in one place with a purpose. And the gathering place was exactly where she was in the yard. Doesn't that mean that Liu Yu, who rushed out now, has become their primary target? Not far away, Liu Yu stood in the middle of the road, watching the villagers running towards him from all directions. It's better to warm up first. Dare to put a curse on Yanqing, which is one thing that has crossed the line. Now he is even controlling ordinary people, which is a taboo. Liu Yu raised a smile and slowly clenched his fists. "If you don't die, I will be sorry to all the ancestors." The words fell. Liu Yu stepped on the ground, and his whole body rushed into the crowd like a black line. The strong wind alone blew the 7 or 8 villagers in the lead several meters away. But before they fell to the ground, Liu Yu raised his hand and made a seal. A golden light flashed on his body. While catching them, he directly killed the poisonous insects in their bodies. Then he released the force and threw them to the ground. The whole process happened in a flash. Afterwards, Liu Yu kept walking among the crowd and did the same thing. Wherever it passed, golden light appeared. Soon. Less than 5 minutes. Liu Yu raised his hand and straightened his clothes. On the ground, hundreds of villagers were lying quietly, with traces of blood coming out of their mouths and noses. Ordinary people can't see anything. But if someone with some cultivation experience had done this, he would definitely be able to see that those blood threads were filled with the remnants of poisonous insects. Liu Yu, are you okay? At this time, Jiang Meng rushed out of the yard in a hurry, grabbed Liu Yu and checked him up and down. She had just witnessed the whole process with her own eyes, and her heart was in her throat. Now seeing these crazy villagers lying down, she could no longer bear it and ran out. Hey! Seeing Jiang Meng's worried look, Liu Yu couldn't help but touch his nose. It's all solved. These villagers are not a big problem. I'll just make some medicine for them to restore their vitality later. But the important thing now is... Liu Yu turned his head and looked towards the opposite hillside. His gaze instantly spanned hundreds of meters and stared at that cave. I'll be right back. 5 minutes is enough. Chapter 15, How does it feel to hit a wall? At this time, a painful wailing sound kept echoing in the cave. I saw a skinny man lying on the ground, crawling out of the cave step by step. Come to the cave entrance. In the sunlight, the skinny man's black robe was stained with blood, and his scarred face was filled with fear and unwillingness. Damn it! I have been raising these poisonous insects for more than 10 years. How could he be eliminated so easily? Could it be that he didn't care about the safety of ordinary people at all? Isn't he a Taoist? The skinny man howled in pain. Looking closely at the holes on his arms, blood was gushing out continuously, as if he had suffered some severe injury. Compared to these, what really tortured the skinny man was that there was a living thing rising and falling wildly in his chest. Asshole, stop messing around. I know you're in pain because ZGU died. I feel bad too. I've lost at least 20% of my blood and energy. Oh. I'm gonna fuck you. The skinny man kept rolling around, holding his chest, as if there was something else in his heart. In desperation, the skinny man could only beg for mercy desperately. Calm down, I beg you, calm down, that guy is indeed an expert. After we leave here, I will feed you with blood, virgin blood, 3, no, 10. As the skinny man made the promise, the heaving in his heart slowly disappeared. Call. The skinny man let out a long sigh, stood up and looked at the blood flowing from his arm, and couldn't help feeling a wave of pain in his flesh. This is all my blood and essence, and there are hundreds of subparasites. That damn guy dared to attack even ordinary people. Otherwise, as long as a person doesn't say he is injured, just scratch his skin, my GU will flow into the wound and lock his mind. Vicious Taoists. If I had known that I would provoke such a person, I would not have accepted this job from the Jiang family no matter what. The skinny man cursed angrily, then staggered away. But at this moment, a subtle sound passed by his ears. The skinny man suddenly raised his head, a look of fear instantly appeared in his eyes, and he stared at the location below the mountain. I saw only the foot of the mountain. Liu Yu was running towards them at a fast pace. How did this bastard lock onto my location? The skinny man's pupils trembled. At this time, Liu Yu's speed was extremely fast, his perception spread all around, and even some subtle traces could not be hidden from him. For example, some inconspicuous mosquitoes and flies flying in the air. You are cautious and know the information about insect control, but you can't escape. Liu Yu's face was solemn. He stepped on the ground and suddenly shot out dozens of meters, so fast that he looked like a black line. On the mountain. The skinny man felt the warning from the mother GU in his heart. The mother GU could see the scene discovered by the child GU even hundreds of meters away, so she naturally knew what Liu Yu was doing. Damn it, is he a Taoist or a martial artist? How can he be so fast? He was able to find me from such a distance, could it be some kind of tracking technique? But I've never come into contact with him. The skinny man gritted his teeth and suddenly seemed to think of a possibility. Could it be that he is a Taoist priest? But this thought only lasted for a second before it was strangled to death by the skinny man. The Dharma ending period lasts for hundreds of years. The spiritual energy was cut off, and the path of cultivation was almost cut off. The realm of cultivators is also divided into Qi refining, bone tempering, Earth Master, Heaven Master, and Great Heavenly Master. Heavenly Master realm. That is already the pinnacle of the world of cultivators, it is the limit. As for the Great Heavenly Master, he only exists in legends. Can a mere Jiang family attract a Heavenly Master to take action? Impossible. The skinny man shook his head resolutely, and even said self-deprecatingly, "Besides, I am not worthy. If I were a Heavenly Master, would I still be able to jump around?" After realizing this, the skinny man's eyes gradually calmed down. Such a fast speed may be due to Taoist methods such as drawing talismans and forming seals, but it should not last so long, unless it is simply trying to fight me to the death. Maybe, he's still a warrior. The realm divisions of warriors and cultivators are similar, the difference is that warriors do not practice Taoism, but simply enter the Tao with their physical bodies, and their limit is only the corresponding Earth Master realm. But his powerful physique is, in a certain sense, far more terrifying than that of monks. But only in a sense. No matter which possibility it is, the former tried his best but most of his strength was used to hurry on. If it was a warrior, it would be easier to deal with. It's just a matter of physical strength. The skinny man's eyes turned cold, and he finally gritted his teeth. It's possible to kill him. Thinking of this, the skinny man sat down on the ground, raised his hand, revealing his black fingertips, and scratched his forehead fiercely. Next second, a string of blood beads flew out. The skinny man made seals with his hands and muttered something quickly. I saw the string of blood beads suddenly flying up out of thin air, like living things, twisting into strange shapes in the air. He. The skinny man opened his eyes and let out a hideous laugh. Dare to chase me, damn it, who do you think I am? I will kill you with the blood curse. As the words fell, the string of blood beads shot towards the distance like a sharp sword, and disappeared in the blink of an eye at such a fast speed. Far away, Liu Yu, who was running wildly, had already seen the cave. But at this moment, Liu Yu narrowed his eyes suddenly and saw the string of blood beads flying towards him, carrying a foul evil spirit. Next second, bang! The string of blood beads hit Liu Yu's forehead. Hit! The skinny man raised his head excitedly, with an ecstatic look on his face. Blood curse Yu, take the blood from my heart to nourish, anyone who is hit will have their soul polluted, gods and ghosts will die. At the same time, the string of blood beads between Liu Yu's eyebrows were flowing in little by little, completely ignoring the obstruction of the skin. Har ha 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 ha. The skinny man couldn't help but burst into laughter. But the next second, woo! The skinny man's Adam's apple rolled, his laughter stopped abruptly, and even his whole body froze. Only seen in the distance. Liu Yu still maintained the striding posture, but slowly raised one hand, as if wiping away some dirt, and wiped off the blood drop with one hand. That's it. Liu Yu looked at the blood bead that was struggling wildly in the palm of his hand. And all over his body, there was a ball of dazzling golden light. Not to mention the blood beads, even a real spell could not penetrate it. You are worthy of using this method on a heavenly master and trying to defile my soul. Madness. Liu Yu sneered, clasped his palms together and crushed the blood bead. Immediately, a shrill scream came from the blood bead. And the cave entrance. The moment the blood bead was crushed, the skinny man's eyebrows exploded and blood spurted out. Call. The skinny man gasped heavily and knelt on the ground tremblingly. Damn it, where exactly is his origin and why is his soul so powerful? Chapter 16, Still have a backup plan? Impossible. The skinny man raised his head and let out an unwilling roar. Immediately following, he forced himself to stand up, reached out to tear off a piece of bloody flesh from his arm, and stuffed it directly into his chest. And a crack suddenly appeared in his chest, swallowing up the piece of flesh and blood. Run, give me some more strength, we have to hurry up and run. As long as we run away, we can survive. We must survive. The skinny man had an extreme desire for life in his eyes and staggered into the dense forest. Want to run? Liu Yu looked at the staggering figure in front of him. Don't mention the Jiang family's commission. If we let you run away, the majesty of our Tianmen since ancient times will become a joke. Liu Yu picked up a stone, aimed it at the fleeing figure, turned his wrist and flicked his finger. Cool. The stone suddenly made a whistling sound and flew away into the air. The man who was running away immediately heard the sound. No, that's not good. Who on earth is this person? I just took a little money to do something for someone, why does such a strong person have to target me to death? At this moment, the skinny man really regretted it. But unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in the world. Especially after he received the news, he deliberately wanted to deal with Liu Yu. Once a decision is made, you have to face the consequences. Bang! At the moment when the skinny man turned around in horror, a stone pierced his chest directly, crushing his heart into powder. Woo! The skinny man didn't feel anything at all, because the stone was moving too fast. But a sharp scream came from his chest, which disappeared completely after a few screams. Jiu, Gu's mother is dead. The skinny man belatedly realized and lowered his head, looking at the blood plasma flowing out of the blood hole in his chest. The one who controls the poison. Only when one feeds the Jiu worm with the blood from the apex of the heart until the Jiu worm and the heart coexist symbiotically can one be called a Jiu master. Naturally, for the Jiu master, the Jiu mother is the source of life. After all, missing arms and legs is not fatal. But once the Jiu mother dies, there is no hope for survival, no chance at all. I just wanted to kill you, but you actually killed me. You are so cruel. The skinny man tried his best to look up at Liu Yu in the distance. Next second, a muffled sound. The skinny man fell to the ground, completely out of breath. At the same time, his body seemed to be festering, and dense swarms of insects crawled out, but they all died within a few breaths. Not far away. After realizing that the skinny man had lost his vitality, Liu Yu withdrew his gaze. Of course, he also took a look at the insects on the ground. He knew something about Miao Jiang's methods, but he still felt unlucky when he saw this rotting scene. No more rules in your next life. Liu Yu left after saying this. Soon. When Liu Yu came back, he saw Jiang Meng guarding the gate of the yard. It was beyond his expectation. Although Jiang Meng had an uneasy look on his face, he was not panicked. There was even a calmness in his eyes that far exceeded that of his peers. Although he was clearly powerless, he was still alert to his surroundings. Jiang Meng! Liu Yu shouted from a distance. Hearing Liu Yu's voice, Jiang Meng immediately felt as if a force had been lifted off her shoulders, and she hurried forward to meet him. How are you not hurt? Liu Yu smiled slightly and gave Jiang Meng a reassuring look. The guy who crossed the line has been dealt with. He will never have the chance to cause trouble for your Jiang family in this life. Hearing this, Jiang Meng immediately understood what Liu Yu meant. There is no chance in this life, doesn't that mean that person is dead? Of course, Jiang Meng did not ask this question. After all, she was the head of the family, and she knew very well that some questions could not be asked too directly. All she needed to know was that the person who brought trouble to the Jiang family had disappeared. Aside, Liu Yu was also observing Jiang Meng's expression. After seeing her slight surprise, he showed an expression of relief. She has a good character. No wonder Jiang Qingshan handed the Jiang family over to her. Liu Yu smiled calmly and looked at the people lying on the ground in the village. Please help and check the conditions of these villagers on the ground. Liu Yu said this and walked straight away. Hey, I've already notified the Jiang family to send someone to rescue. Jiang Meng opened her mouth, but Liu Yu had already walked a few steps and was almost out of sight, so she hurried to check on the rest of the people. Waiting for Liu Yu to come back. He was holding a large pile of herbs in his arms, and it was obvious that they had just been picked. This is. Jiang Meng looked at Liu Yu curiously. Medicinal herbs. These people are controlled by poisonous insects. Some are too old, and some are children with weak resistance. I'm afraid their bodies can't handle such a thing. These herbs are for replenishing qi and blood. Just drink them and they'll be fine. As Liu Yu spoke, he sorted the herbs, then turned around and found a big pot from the old man's house and started a fire on the spot. Aside, Jiang Meng looked at the busy Liu Yu and was a little overwhelmed for a moment. She had thought about asking Liu Yu before if he could save these people. But thinking of Liu Yu's identity and abilities, she called the Jiang family. And now, during the short time I spent with Liu Yu. Liu Yu had already given her a great sense of contrast, from being elegant and ethereal at the beginning to being murderous and cold later on. Now, she saw a kind of pure kindness in Liu Yu again. Call. Jiang Meng belatedly withdrew her gaze, especially when she saw Liu Yu giving her a puzzled look. No, it's okay. Jiang Meng patted her blushing face, calmed down and asked, is there anything I can help with? Go find some bowls, and everyone will have to drink the medicine later. The other side. The skinny man's body lay on the ground, and a foul stench was emitted in a short period of time. At this time, a series of footsteps were heard amid the swaying of leaves. This guy, is he dead? A man in black suit lowered his head and glanced at the skinny man. Behind him, there were nearly 20 people, all dressed in black, with weapons on their backs, and they all subconsciously covered their noses. It seems that my guess was correct. This guy will never accomplish anything. The leading man in black squatted down and took out a palm-sized iron cigarette case from his arms. Just took it out. The iron box began to vibrate strangely, and the next second, a thumb-sized poisonous insect flew out and landed directly on the skinny man's heart. Next second. Woo! A suppressed inhalation sound suddenly sounded. The skinny man's eyes suddenly widened, and his sunken chest bulged strangely. Awesome, you guys are here. It's worth it that I left the other half of the Mother Gu to your grandfather. Har har har, no one could have imagined that this is the backup plan of the Gu sect. The skinny man let out a hoarse laugh and looked at the man in black. Take me back immediately and prepare virgins for me. The more the better. My life is short and I cannot waste any time. Hurry. Chapter 17 The Killer Attacks. Good. The man in black nodded silently. But the next second. Puff. The sound of flesh tearing pierced the air. On the ground. The skinny man trembled all over, with a look of belated confusion in his eyes. I didn't say I would take you back. I'm just saying, you can't live anymore after this happens. No matter whether you can deal with that young man or not, you have no value in living. The man in black spoke silently, with a dagger in his hand. Also, I asked me to see if you really have some way to bring the dead back to life. I will go back and tell you that you do have this method. Rest in peace, we will take care of the stall you left behind. The man in black put his hands on the skinny man's eyes, stood up and pointed at the ground towards the person next to him. This guy is truly miraculous. His entire body was rotten, but a bug flew into his body and he came back to life. Let's go, kill those two first, and then we can finish it and go back sooner. As the group walked away. Original place. The skinny man lay quietly on the ground until the wind blew and a wound appeared on his neck, almost completely cutting off his entire neck. That's like being dead and unable to die anymore. He probably never imagined in his dreams that even though he had left such a backup plan and even managed to escape Liu Yu's attack, he would eventually die at the hands of these people. The other side. In the village. The boiling pot was emitting billowing hot steam. Outside the yard, Liu Yu brought the villagers over one by one and first used his strength to dispel the traces of the poisonous insects in their bodies. Jiang Meng then brought over bowls of medicine and fed them into the villagers' mouths. After working for an hour, Jiang Meng rubbed his sore arms and looked at Liu Yu. At this time, many villagers had woken up and learned about the whole incident from Jiang Meng. They all looked at Liu Yu with gratitude. But Jiang Meng waved his hand to stop those people and signaled everyone to be quiet. Watching Liu Yu carefully massaging the acupoints of the villagers one by one to relax their muscles and bones. I can't help it. Jiang Meng was a little dazed by what she saw. Wait until Liu Yu stands up and comes in front of Jiang Meng. What's wrong? No, nothing. Jiang Meng blushed when she realized what was happening, turned her head awkwardly, and raised her hand to hold up her hair. And just at this moment. Sudden. Ong. A subtle voice passed by Liu Yu's ears, causing him to turn around suddenly and look into the distance. What's wrong? Jiang Meng noticed that Liu Yu's face looked strange and asked quickly. I'm going out for a while. I'll be back soon. After Liu Yu finished speaking, he turned and walked out of the village. After his figure completely entered the dense forest, he took a step forward and quickly rushed up the mountain. At the same time, just outside the village, on a high mountain, dozens of men in black were staying there, and one of them was even lying on a tree holding a telescope. Oh shit. The man suddenly cursed under his breath, leaned against the tree branch, and rubbed his eyes hard with his hands. Over to the side, everyone under the tree also stopped what they were doing. Some of them were wiping their long knives, some were holding daggers, and some were even holding shotguns. At this time, they all looked at the guy on the tree. The man in black who was leading the group gave him a questioning look. What's going on in the village? The guy leaned over and looked at the people on the ground, his expression extremely ugly. Damn it, that guy just now seemed to have glanced over here. Hearing this, everyone under the tree couldn't help but burst out laughing, and then continued to pack up their things without paying any attention. The leading man in black glared at the guy unhappily. This place is at least 1 kilometer away from the village. You told me he has come here. You are so suspicious. The man licked his tongue as he spoke. This nosy boy and the Jiang family woman are our targets this time. Once we finish this job, you will have enough time to live happily for 2 or 3 years. On the tree. The guy didn't say anything when he heard the voice. He bent down and raised the telescope again. But slowly. No, something's wrong. The guy's expression gradually became serious, and upon closer inspection, he could see sweat starting to seep out of his face. Boss, that guy is gone. Under the tree. The man in black looked at his servant's misbehavior and his expression became completely serious. If he was suspicious before. But now the guy's expression clearly showed that he had seen something terrible. The others also stopped what they were doing again and looked at the guy on the tree with solemn eyes. Hey, what the hell did you see? A sturdy young man couldn't help but yelled. And what answered him was a roar of anger. His coming, 100 meters, no, so fast, 50 meters, 30. The guy on the tree yelled frantically, using his hands so hard that he almost broke the telescope. Before he could finish, a sound of wind blew. Almost no one saw it clearly. I saw the telescope in the guy's hand exploded, and then he fell straight off the tree and hit the ground. Crash. Everyone stood up instantly and gathered around to see the guy lying on the ground with a huge bloody hole in his left eye. What is that? A sharp-eyed man saw a grayish-white object in the bloody eye socket. A stone. After seeing it clearly, the man couldn't help but roar in horror, while looking around intently. It was a rock. It pierced through the telescope and lodged itself into his head, killing him instantly. As the man finished speaking, the entire forest suddenly became terrifyingly silent, and everyone's eyes were wide open with anger. A stone. Coming through the air, piercing through the telescope and killing people? This method is beyond their understanding. What's even more terrifying is that in this dead silence, the sound of light footsteps suddenly rang out. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads to look in the direction where the sound came from. But before they could move, the sound of footsteps seemed to hit their hearts. The violent shock made them all cover their chests, and cold sweat broke out on their faces uncontrollably. Everyone, you have a lot of resentment. You have killed a lot of people, right? A faint voice arose, carrying with it a chill that overshadowed their souls. You followed me all the way before, and it seems that you came here for me. Now some of you have a new resentment. It seems to be that GU master. It seems that I underestimated Miao Jiang's methods. His escape route was cut off in your hands. Liu Yu walked out of the dense forest slowly, one hand behind his back, and as he spoke, a terrifying pressure swept towards everyone. The people who were already unable to move began to tremble uncontrollably. In one word, you can survive. Liu Yu glanced at the 20 or so people, his eyes sweeping over the weapons in their hands one by one. Resentment. Everyone has a lot of resentment. This is accumulated from killing and slaughtering of dead people. Obviously, these are a group of desperate criminals who deserve to die, or to be fair, they are killers. Liu Yu retracted his gaze and spoke slowly. Who sent you? Chapter 18, Salvation. Dead silence. The entire jungle was deathly silent. There were more than 20 killers, and it wasn't that they didn't speak, but that they were all trembling all over. The mere appearance of Liu Yu was like a mountain, weighing them down so horribly that they couldn't even breathe and they dared not even look him in the face. At this time. You? A difficult voice sounded. Liu Yu looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man in black who was in his 30s, with a bloodshot face. Want to answer? Liu Yu stared at the man with a smile on his face, but what he could see was the almost inhuman eyes of the man in black. It seems there is nothing more to ask. Liu Yu raised his eyebrows, then seemed to become interested and slowly retracted his aura. Next second. Call. The man in black suddenly fell to the ground. Although the rest of the people had also resumed their activities, they all looked like they had been fished out of the water, lying on the ground and gasping for breath. At this time, Liu Yu's gaze swept across everyone's faces one by one, looking at that murderous face, which was entangled with several or even more than 10 resentments. These are all people who deserve to die. Don't be stupid, or it will be easy to kill them. Liu Yu murmured in his heart, his eyes flickering. Ahead. The man in black was still breathing heavily, and he looked at Liu Yu as if he had seen a ghost. Obviously, Liu Yu's methods were beyond their understanding. But if you look closely, the man's eyes are still cold, with a bone-chilling ferocity and full of hostility. It seemed that cruelty and murderousness had been engraved deep into his heart. Call. The man in black let out a long breath. Next second. He suddenly stood up and let out a loud shout. Get started. At his command, the rest of the people turned over at once, raised various weapons in their hands, and their target was Liu Yu. Looking at the 20 or so people who suddenly jumped up, there was no surprise in Liu Yu's eyes. It even seemed as if he was waiting for this scene. These killers, who are entangled with resentment, have blood on their hands. Moreover, resentment is something that entangles both the body and the heart. In other words, these guys have long been controlled by resentment. So Liu Yu gave them a chance, as long as they could answer the questions actively. But obviously, the result was not surprising, nothing could be asked from them. And once he regains his freedom, he will be an unleashed killing machine and will show no mercy to anyone. As expected, he is the one who eats this bowl of rice, so fierce. Liu Yu smiled slightly, took a step forward, and his figure left a shadow. Almost instantly. Puff. The sound of blood tearing was heard. Liu Yu was seen to be extremely fast, and the strong wind he rushed over with blew away several people. But this moment is different from dealing with those villagers. Liu Yu rushed forward like a high-speed train, knocking several people flying in the air, their bodies covered in blood. Liu Yu rushed into the crowd, punching, palming, and even the strong wind he created through the air was like a cutting machine, stirring up a blood mist all over the sky. Less than a minute. After Liu Yu shook off the blood stains on his clothes. At this time, more than 20 killers were all lying on the ground. Few of them were still breathing, but their breath was as weak as a flame that would go out with a blow. The only one still alive was the man in black. He was standing in the distance. He was the first one to rush towards Liu Yu, but at this time he was the only one who was not attacked by Liu Yu. But if you look closely, the man in black seemed to have lost all his faith and stood there with lifeless eyes. Until Liu Yu shook the blood off his hands and looked back at him. The man in black came to his senses and murmured, "Who are you?" This group of people are all roaming around the world, living on the edge of a knife, and specializing in killing people. They will do anything for money. Of course, after years of wandering around, I've seen all kinds of people. Even the GU masters they had come across before were not unkillable. After all, a killer relies not only on skills, but also on calculations. But the young man in front of me. The terrifying and despairing skills and the strange aura made them unable to move. Regret it. Liu Yu looked coldly at the man in black in front of him. The man in black closed his mouth for a moment, then a smile appeared on his face and he said to Liu Yu, "I just hate that I can't kill you." Liu Yu narrowed his eyes, looked at the man in black who had no fear in his eyes, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "You have guts." Liu Yu raised his hand, creating a whistling sound in the wind. With a bang, the man in black fell straight to the ground. At this point, all the killers were executed. Liu Yu looked at the corpses of the killers on the ground, formed a seal with one hand, and a golden light spread out in an instant, covering everyone. At the same time, a rotating bagua slowly emerged between Liu Yu's eyebrows. "Seal up." A low voice came from Liu Yu's mouth. The rolling golden light immediately pressed down on all the killers like a tide, and a creepy creaking sound was heard. Then, the black air was completely eliminated by the golden light. This was the resentment that was entangled with those killers. Until all the resentment is washed away. Although we don't have to worry about these grievances taking shape and harming people in this Dharma-ending age, we are still good people who have done our best. Liu Yu gathered together the bodies of the killers who had washed away their resentment and started a blazing fire. Soon, when Liu Yu went down the mountain, he saw Jiang Meng, who was waiting with eyes full of anticipation. Liu Yu. Jiang Meng took a closer look at Liu Yu, and his eyes suddenly became serious. What happened on the mountain? Looking at Jiang Meng's expression, he obviously guessed something from the blood on his body. After all, after spending some time together, he could see that Jiang Meng was a thoughtful girl. Liu Yu did not hide it and spoke. A group of assassins came to the mountain. To be precise, they followed us all the way from Yanqing's departure. They showed up after the GU master died. As for who sent them, they won't tell me, and I'm too lazy to waste my breath on them. Jiang Meng heard a lot of information from Liu Yu's cruel words. Someone is targeting us. Jiang Meng lowered his head, a complex aura emanating from his body, as if he couldn't believe it, but more of it was anger. This time she brought Liu Yu to the ancestral tomb, and not many people in the Jiang family knew about it. As for being seen by someone when going out, even though she came to the old city alone, Yanqing's 3 acres of land was very important to her as the head of the Jiang family. It's easy to hide your tracks. But now, someone has been following me since the beginning. There is only one explanation. Someone leaked her whereabouts, and it might even be that person who sent the killer. Call. Jiang Meng exhaled slightly, with a hint of sadness in his eyes. There are only a few people in the Jiang family who know the purpose of my trip. Do we have to go that far? Chapter 19, for Elephant Heavenly King Formation. In a blink of an eye, it was noon. A group of villagers stood at the entrance of the village, looking at Liu Yu and Jiang Meng with tears of gratitude. I'll leave you the prescription. For the next 3 days, drink it once a day. Don't be lazy, but don't drink too much either. Also, avoid the early morning hours at night and get more sun during the day. Liu Yu spoke patiently to the old man who was in the lead. When righteousness arises in your heart, the evil will be eliminated. The old man nodded repeatedly upon hearing this, and the others also looked at him with reverence. After all, they were controlled by GU before, but that doesn't mean they didn't know what was happening. Even if it feels like a dream. But the crazy self in the dream was so terrifying. What would have been the consequences if Liu Yu hadn't taken action? Okay, no need to send me off. Liu Yu waved to the villagers and left with Jiang Meng. Out of the village. I noticed that you have been looking at me with strange eyes. What's wrong with my face? Liu Yu looked at Jiang Meng curiously and asked with a smile. Perhaps it was because of this experience that the two of them became closer. Jiang Meng didn't hide anything when she heard that, and just looked at Liu Yu calmly. It's just a little strange. When I first met you, you gave me a feeling of being ethereal and graceful, but when facing the evil spirits, you were so resolute and decisive. Before Jiang Meng could finish her words, Liu Yu couldn't help but shook his head. Taoists are also human beings. The so-called cultivation of Taoism is just to cultivate one's own mind. I am also a human being. Looking at Liu Yu's back as he left. Jiang Meng was stunned for a moment, and a thought that made her feel embarrassed emerged in her mind. She smoothed her hair and hurried to follow Liu Yu. After a while. Liu Yu, are these the killers? Jiang Meng looked at the burnt land covered with ashes. From the burn marks, she guessed something. Liu Yu nodded and looked at Jiang Meng with interest. About the people who sent these killers. Liu Yu was too lazy to guess, nor did he want to get involved in the Jiang family's affairs. But now he wanted to see Jiang Meng's reaction, especially this girl. She must have her own ideas. Really? Liu Yu, what do you think of my second uncle? Jiang Meng asked hesitantly, his eyes serious and full of trust. Liu Yu thought for a moment, and the image of the second master of the Jiang family appeared in his mind. His eyes are filled with anger and his forehead is filled with blood. He is a ruthless person. Liu Yu said slowly, then suddenly remembered something and looked at Jiang Meng meaningfully. But in the Fudong Bureau, all of you Jiang family members have the same temperament, without exception. Hearing this, Jiang Meng did not refute, and even a sharp edge gradually gathered in her eyes. Going back to the foot of the mountain, Jiang Meng drove Liu Yu towards the old town. Quite a while. Go back and tell the old man that the matter of the ancestral tomb has been resolved. If you have any follow-up questions, come to me again. After getting out of the car at the alley, Liu Yu waved his hand, indicating that Jiang Meng didn't need to see him off. Jiang Meng wanted to say something else, but when she heard Liu Yu's next sentence, she couldn't help but smile. This gives her a chance to get in touch again. Okay, I'll go back first. Jiang Meng smiled, got in the car and left. This girl. A smile appeared on Liu Yu's lips, but he was suddenly stunned when he turned around. Hiss. This is not right. I didn't mean to mention it, but the Jiang family can't let people work for free. Why don't you mention the payment? After muttering a few words, Liu Yu shook his head helplessly and walked towards the old house. But at this time, Mr. Xiaolu. An urgent shout was heard. Liu Yu looked up and found a group of old neighbors crowded at the gate of the courtyard. These old people had a lot of contact with Liu Yu on a daily basis, and they were respectful to the elderly and were particularly polite to Liu Yu. But at this moment, they were all crowded at the door, all with anxious looks on their faces. What's wrong? Liu Yu walked over quickly. As soon as he asked the question, Liu Yu realized something was wrong. At this time, there was a bloody handprint on the door of the old house, and there was a fresh pool of blood on the threshold. Mr. Xiaolu, you are back. A trembling old man pointed at the blood on the ground. Crazy, he just ran back, vomiting blood all the way. He looked like he was beaten up, just. The old man reacted after he finished speaking and exchanged glances with the person next to him. Half an hour ago. Just half an hour ago. When Liu Yu heard this, he pushed the door open and saw He-bai lying under the threshold. Why not? Liu Yu turned He-bai over. Really? At this time, He-bai was covered in blood, his face was unnaturally pale, blood was still dripping from his chest, and he had already fainted. Liu Yu reached out and lifted the clothes on He-bai's chest, and what he saw was a collapse. It felt like something blunt had hit him hard in the heart. When I touched it with my hand, I could clearly feel that my sternum was cracked. Call. Liu Yu withdrew his hand with a gloomy expression. Everyone, go away, nothing else. Liu Yu said something, picked it up with one hand, and waved his other hand to close the gate automatically. Ha! Everyone outside the door saw Liu Yu's amazing method. Immortal. Mr. Xiaolu is indeed an immortal. My grandfather once said that this old house is where immortals live. At that time, important people came to visit every day. Everyone, if we all listen, Mr. Liu might be merciful and give us a few decades of life. Hey, old Deng, you are just greedy. You are over 90 years old and still haven't lived enough. In my opinion, just let me be younger and stand up once. It will be fine after standing up for a while. The old gun has been out of service for decades. Hey, I just want to remember the feeling. In the hospital. Liu Yu grabbed He-bai and placed him on the stone table. He then raised his hand and pressed it hard on He-bai's chest, using such force that the entire stone table shook violently. He didn't do this to kill He-bai. But it was because Hebi was the reincarnation of a doomed star, and what he practiced was the peerless secret book of Qian Men. The sky is blue. The most masculine and the most powerful, the extreme state is like the coming of heaven. Why stay in the Qian Men old house for 2 years? No matter how weird it was, I could only enter the yard and didn't even dare to enter the house. Naturally, if Liu Yu used his strength, it would be like pouring boiling water into hot oil. Why bother to talk about life or death? What Liu Yu feared even more was that if the evil spirit that transcended reincarnation in He-bai was stimulated, it would lead to even greater consequences. Why not? Liu Yu shouted and exerted force on his palm again. So much so that Liu Yu felt that he had directly grabbed He-bai's heart this time. Next second. Woo! He opened his eyes suddenly, and veins popped out on his forehead. Roar! Why bother to let out a roar? A terrifying black gas spewed out from He-bai's mouth and instantly swept across the entire courtyard. Evil spirit. Liu Yu's face changed. This was the situation he least wanted to see. And at this time, the Qianmen old house, which had been silent for nearly 200 years, felt the evil spirit of destruction and suddenly burst into a golden light that filled the sky. Chapter 20 Weird Things. Oh no, the incense is moving. Feeling the changes in the Qianmen old house, Liu Yu's expression gradually became solemn. This old house in Qianmen was left behind by his ancestor when he came to the mortal world to preach, and the incense has been passed down to this day. The power of ordinary incense is only to bless oneself and detect good and bad luck. But it just so happened that there was once a formation left in this yard. This is to prevent any major changes from happening at a certain moment, such as the advent of evil demons, and this formation will be fully activated. The evil spirit on this kid is so fierce that it can stimulate the for symbol's heavenly king formation. Liu Yu pressed He-Bai and looked up at the sky. Really? At this time, the yard had become a golden world. The whistling sound of the wind was like thunder from heaven, majestic and vast. Looking closely, in the golden light, for divine figures appeared faintly. All of them were giant human bodies, holding demon-subduing pestles, red long swords, and huge umbrellas covering the sky. The four heavenly kings. Liu Yu narrowed his eyes fiercely. Why look at it again? When these four divine figures appeared, the violent evil spirit in his body was like a kitten being ruthlessly suppressed by a big hand. That's not all. The four heavenly kings, who had revived at this time, had already shown a majestic appearance, and the magic weapons in their hands were also emitting golden light. Seeing that the situation was becoming increasingly serious, it was obvious that He-Bai was doomed to die. Damn it, I owe you this. Liu Yu threw He-Bai under the stone table, turned around and took a step forward. Boom! A terrifying air wave burst out from Liu Yu, and his clothes were instantly shattered, revealing a body as white as jade, but containing terrifying power. The power of the sky, vast and dark. Liu Yu formed a seal with one hand, and a circle of bagua appeared between his eyebrows. It then flew behind him and continued to grow larger. Xing, Yu, Ji, Zhan, Ni, He. With every word Liu Yu uttered, his aura surged wildly. Until this moment, Liu Yu finally showed his true strength as a Taoist heavenly master, and he was even climbing towards the grand heavenly master level step by step. Until Liu Yu uttered the last word. Tan. The sound of one word is like thunder. Even the four heavenly kings looked at Liu Yu. At this time, Liu Yu was wrapped in golden threads, which flowed throughout his body like veins. From a distance, it looks like a god descending to the earth. Looking at the four heavenly kings above his head, Liu Yu looked at He-Bai on the ground again. Although he was reluctant, he finally raised his hand. Next second. Clang! A flash of sword light passed by and shot straight towards the four heavenly kings' formation. Under the sword light, it was clearly visible that the figure of the four heavenly kings suddenly twisted, as if it was cut in half by something. The golden light that enveloped the entire courtyard suddenly cracked. A moment. As the golden light gradually disappeared, the figures of the four heavenly kings also disappeared completely, leaving only an empty yard. The formation left by their master is gone just like that. Liu Yu put away his skills, his face full of pain, and he was holding the Qiansha sword in his hand. He turned around and looked at He-Bai, who was still unconscious. The black energy on his body was still floating around unscrupulously. Oh shit! Liu Yu waved his hand, and the Qiansha sword automatically flew back into their house, and he looked at the evil spirit in front of him. Roll! Liu Yu's eyes flashed with golden light, and he suddenly shouted loudly. Immediately, the black air was blown away by him, revealing He-Bai on the ground. Liu Yu grabbed the boy and had a big fight with him. Don't say. This angry big fight is very useful. He-Bai was beaten so hard that his whole body trembled. His eyes slowly regained consciousness until he saw Liu Yu. Liu Yu. Why bother to force a smile? When Liu Yu saw He-Bai's smile, he was so angry that he couldn't help but look a little complicated. This guy is like thunder now. A person born with bad luck has a life harder than iron. It's fine if you're tough, but if you're not careful, the terrifying evil spirit can easily erupt. Moreover, the closer they were to death, the more terrifying the changes in the evil spirit became. This time, even the four heavenly kings' formation was alarmed. You know, this is the formation left by the founder. It is impossible to trigger ordinary evil spirits. Liu Yu, I just saw four fat guys. One of them was holding a club and tried to smack me, but you chopped him down with your knife. Hey. He tilted his head and looked at Liu Yu with a silly smile on his face. You're so nice to me. Hearing their voice, Liu Yu turned his head away in annoyance, and couldn't help but feel the pain on his face. But in the 2 years I have been with He-Bai, putting aside the hidden danger of evil spirit, He-Bai is essentially a pitiful person. A poor man who is tortured by evil spirits. Okay, stop talking about this crap and take a deep breath. Liu Yu looked down at He-Bai. Although He-Bai was confused, he cooperated and did as he was told. At this time, Liu Yu directly hit He-Bai's heart with one palm, and pushed his chest with his other hand. Using 10 fingers together, he adjusted He-Bai's broken sternum little by little. Quite a while. After Liu Yu finished his work, he looked into He-Bai's eyes again. after confirming that this kid was not controlled and lost by the evil spirit. What happened to you with all these injuries? Who did it to you? What did you do to the other person? Liu Yu asked 3 questions in a row, and the last sentence was very abrupt. The reason for asking this question is because of the special nature of Hebi's fate. The star of misfortune is the most evil in the world. Just like in many rumors, the heroes of the time often believe that it is Goddess Will that decides their fate, and they cannot die no matter what. Why must this be my fate? A star of destiny can only be killed by someone with the corresponding fate. In other words, destroyed by force with great cultivation, such as Liu Yu. Besides, there was almost no one who could deal with Hebi. Just because of this evil spirit that transcends reincarnation, under the crushing of fate, ordinary people are just lambs to be slaughtered in front of him. And the ground. Hebi, who was grimacing in pain, suddenly had a flash of anger in his eyes when he heard Liu Yu's words. A stinky bitch buried underground. Hebi shouted in a low voice, some memories seemed to emerge in his eyes, and even his hands began to struggle. Woman. Liu Yu only understood half of what was said, so he reached out and held Hebi down, then gave him another hard blow on the forehead. Calm down, what buried woman? Why didn't he get angry even after being beaten? He took a deep breath skillfully, and until his eyes regained calm, he spoke to Liu Yu seriously. Donghua City, right where the house is being built. I went to play with Erguzi, and he was dragged underground by that woman. The woman was in a big pit underground, very dark. When it comes to the word very dark, why do you suddenly close your eyes in unbearable pain? Immediately, Liu Yu saw the black energy on Hebi's body suddenly move, as if in agreement, revealing a strong greed and joy. The big pit, can make the evil spirit show this appearance? Is it the desire to devour? Liu Yu's expression gradually became serious, and he turned around and looked into the distance. Why did he stay around the old city for the past 2 years? Because of Liu Yu's restraint, he was very honest except for the times when he was careless in doing things. Donghua City, why bother saying it's a construction site? Erguzi seems to be a homeless kid he knows. Liu Yu closed his eyes and recalled Hebi's words every day, while raising his hand and holding up a coin. And just as the coin fell, clang! The coin seemed to be deflected from its falling trajectory by an invisible force. Liu Yu suddenly opened his eyes, grabbed the coin, and his eyes were completely cold. There really is something weird. Chapter 21, Ghostland. In the evening. Liu Yu. Hebi's loud voice echoed in the yard. Meat, big chunks of meat, I can eat it, give it to me. On the side, Liu Yu looked at the palm-sized pieces of beef in the pot, smiled and picked up a piece to give to Hebi. Hebi just sat on the stone bench, holding the bowl, and when the meat was handed to him, he immediately started to gobble it up. This was in contrast to the way his chest had collapsed 3 hours ago. It's simply a miracle of life. This guy. Liu Yu shook his head and looked at Hebi's whole body. 2 years together. He no longer just viewed Hebi as a bomb that could explode at any time. In a sense, Liu Yu is more inclined to believe that this is fate, or mission. So what if I was born with a bad luck? They say fate determines destiny, but I don't believe it. A hint of determination flashed in Liu Yu's eyes. Seeing that Hebi had almost finished eating, he immediately picked up another piece for Hebi. Until the sunset appears. Can we go? Liu Yu looked at Hebi lying on the ground. He turned his head lazily and glanced at Liu Yu, giving him a look that showed he had no interest in anything. Liu Yu smiled faintly and said, "Take me to find the woman you mentioned. I'm quite interested in her. If it's convenient, I can avenge you." When Hebi heard this, he immediately sat up to make sure that Liu Yu was not joking. "Hey, I knew you were the best to me." Hebi let out an exaggerated roar, got up, put his arm around Liu Yu's shoulders, his face full of joy. "Don't make trouble. Lead the way." Liu Yu scolded in a serious tone. Hebi didn't fall for Liu Yu's trick. He pulled him and shook him for a while, then covered his chest and ran out of the yard. When leaving, Liu Yu looked back at the yard. Without the 4 symbols Heavenly King formation, my spiritual charm is missing a full 9 levels. I will have to make up for it when my cultivation level is accumulated. Liu Yu took a few glances, shook his feet, and caught up with Hebi in a few steps. And just after Liu Yu left, the originally moving black line on the door of the old courtyard suddenly became thicker. Without the suppression of the four symbols Heavenly King formation, it was obvious that the evil spirits that were turning into murderous spirits quickly took shape, and now they fell directly to the ground and shot out. If Liu Yu were here, he would definitely recognize that this was caused by Liu Wei's kick last time. Now the evil spirit has gone. Originally Liu Yu concluded that Liu Wei would not survive more than 7 days, but now that he can survive 3 days, it can be considered that Liu Wei is very lucky. The other side. Liu Yu and Hebai ran all their way and could see a construction site surrounded by green iron sheets in the distance. That's it. Why point your finger at the construction site in the distance? That woman is in there. Urguzi was also captured by her. Liu Yu glanced at the construction site. He had heard of this place. When he went down the mountain 2 years ago, he happened to see it being developed. He heard that more than 2 billion yuan was invested to build a top-notch residential area. However, the construction has been intermittent over the past 2 years, and now even the main frame has not been built. But at this time, in Liu Yu's eyes, this construction site was completely filled with evil spirit. What's even more strange is that the black air gathered at the construction site. If you didn't come to see it with your own eyes, you wouldn't be able to detect it just by perception or divination. Spiritual realm. Liu Yu uttered these 2 words uncertainly. He had heard in the past that some extremely dark or extremely dangerous places would become a world of their own after they were formed. Unless you see it in person, it is almost impossible to detect it from the outside. And once this kind of place is fully formed, it often represents extreme danger. Therefore, a more appropriate name for the spiritual realm is the Ghost Den. I didn't expect that I would run into this. Liu Yu frowned slightly, feeling a little guilty. After all, the formation of the spiritual realm requires a very long time, and there are many signs even before it takes shape. But obviously, because of the restriction on his cultivation in the past 2 years, he didn't even notice that this spiritual realm had completely taken shape. At the same time, this also explains why the evil spirit in Hebai's body shows excitement. For the evil spirit that transcends reincarnation, the origin of this spiritual realm is its best devouring object. It's not too late, after all. Liu Yu suppressed his thoughts and looked at Hebai, who was pacing anxiously beside him. Liu Yu, when are you going to rush in? I'm going to save Urguzi. That kid was born without parents and was hungry every day. It was only until he met me that I taught him how to beg for food. He has only grown fat in the past 2 years. If I had known he wanted to treat this empty construction site as his home, I should have stopped him. There's a woman who steals children here. Why bother saying that? He slapped himself on the forehead in self-blame. The point is, I haven't defeated that bitch yet. She punched me in the chest. On the side, Liu Yu reached out and patted Hebai, with a majestic aura emanating from his body. Just rush in. After saying that, Liu Yu took the lead and came to the iron fence. He jumped more than 3 meters high with a tiptoe and flipped over. Behind. Hey, I can't jump that high, Liu Yu, wait for me. He shouted, but his movements were not slow. He lay on the ground, grabbed a corner of the iron sheet, opened a gap, stuck his head in, and squeezed his whole body in. And Liu Yu who came in first. As soon as he landed on the ground, black evil spirits swept over and enveloped him. Woo woo. A faint voice passed by Liu Yu's ears. Sad, resentful, painful, wailing. Countless voices intertwined and rushed into Liu Yu's ears frantically. It's just a spell of alluring ghosts. Liu Yu's face was solemn, with golden light flashing in his eyes. His violent momentum blew the black fog away dozens of meters. At this time, Hebai also squeezed in from behind. However, as soon as he showed up, the murderous aura from his body gushed out uncontrollably, and the surrounding black fog seemed to be even more frightened of Hebai and dispersed away on its own initiative. That's it, Liu Yu, right here. Hebai said it in a muffled voice, and there was an uncontrollable hint of greed in his voice. Calm down. Liu Yu scolded in a deep voice. Hebai immediately shook his head, suppressed the strangeness in his eyes, and returned to his anxious and honest look. Follow me. Liu Yu uttered a sentence, formed a seal with one hand, calculated quickly, and walked towards the center of the black fog step by step. But at this moment, swish, swish, swish. Bright lights shone from behind. Liu Yu looked back. I saw the construction site gate not far away. At this moment, the 2 jeeps braked suddenly and stopped. More than a dozen men jumped out of the car, and after landing, they all tiptoed and stared at the ground as if they were wary of something, their faces full of fear. Looking at Liu Yu and He Bai who broke in, they clearly could not see the existence of the black fog. But they all trembled with fear. Shit, someone actually climbed in. I hope 2 more don't get lost. You 2 idiots, just stand there and don't move. One of the older men, his voice trembling, picked up a loudspeaker and shouted. You better listen to me and come back quickly. I'm fat and I don't lie. You better listen to me and come back. Chapter 22, The Mysterious Disappearance of Workers. Liu Yu. He turned his head and glanced at the dozen or so men, his eyes full of indifference. Let's go beat up that bitch and leave these people alone. But Liu Yu thought for a moment, reached out and held He Bai down, then dragged him back. Soon. Arrived at the gate. What Liu Yu saw on those men's faces were fear and panic, as well as lingering fear that they could still come out. What's going on here? Liu Yu looked at the middle-aged man in the lead and asked. When the middle-aged man saw that the 2 had retreated safely, his face immediately changed and he put his hands on his hips and scolded them. Hey, you 2 little bastards, who told you to come here? Don't come here again, get out of here. On the side, the others also echoed. Damn it, running here in the middle of the night, are you trying to kill yourself? I guess they don't know about the cannibalism at this construction site. At least dozens of our co-workers have disappeared in the past few days. The foreman asked us to keep watch overnight in case someone breaks in. Hey, this foreman is really brave. He dares to hide it. Isn't he afraid that he will be able to hide it? Listening to a group of people chatting, Liu Yu also got a lot of information. Obviously, the abnormalities at this construction site have been going on for more than a day or 2, especially when we heard that a lot of people were missing. This is also the reason why Liu Yu came out. At that moment just now, Liu Yu had already discovered that there were still many living people in this den of evil. Can anyone tell me what happened at this construction site before? Liu Yu asked again, his eyes swept over everyone, finally stopping on the middle-aged man. Hey, you're asking. The middle-aged man looked impatient and raised his hand in a threatening manner. Kid, don't look at me because I'm fat. I have a rough temper. Hearing this, before Liu Yu could say anything, He Bai rushed out from the side. Dare to lose your temper with my brother, I'll beat you to death. He rushed to the middle-aged man and grabbed his neck with his hands. The middle-aged man was stunned by this sudden change and kept struggling, but after just one look at He Bai, he felt his whole brain shaken. It seemed as if the young man in front of him was like an evil ghost at this moment. On the side, the other men saw this scene and immediately rolled up their sleeves. It is obvious that there is no need to bar your teeth and slowly raise your head. Almost instantly. Everyone lost their composure, their eyes quickly filled with fear, a dull expression as if their souls had been completely suppressed. And this is the suppression of fate. Critical moment. Stop it. Liu Yu's voice rang out. He Bai, who was pinching the middle-aged man's neck and shaking him, immediately turned around and looked at Liu Yu. After getting Liu Yu's definite look, He Bai took a deep breath, slowly let go of his hand, and retreated behind Liu Yu little by little. It was also at this time. More than a dozen men slowly woke up, and after they came to their senses, they were all shaking violently. The look he gave He Bai was filled with complete fear. Hey! Liu Yu looked at the middle-aged man and said, Tell me everything about this construction site. Don't leak a single word of what you know. The middle-aged man opened his mouth subconsciously, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Until I saw Liu Yu picked up 2 pebbles from the ground. Under the puzzled gaze of the middle-aged man, she exerted force with her left hand and crushed the pebbles directly. When the middle-aged man's eyes widened with fear, she did the same with her other hand. As the fine stone powder slipped from the palm of my hand. Rubbing pebbles with your hands is not a human being. This guy is not a human being. The middle-aged man screamed in his heart, and then looking at Liu Yu's raised eyebrow and inquiring expression, he straightened his back. Well, that. The middle-aged man licked his lips vigorously, and then tugged at his tie pretending to be calm. There is something dirty on the construction site. It was dug out half a month ago. It can confuse people's minds and make them walk into their hole in a daze. Then it disappears without a trace. No one can find it, and no one dares to look for it. What exactly is that dirty stuff? Liu Yu narrowed his eyes. Not sure, only the foreman knows. The middle-aged man shivered and shook his head. How many people were lost in total? Hearing this, the middle-aged man couldn't help but show fear in his eyes, and a trace of sadness appeared on his face. The batch that came from Yunnan and Guizhou half a month ago lost 17 people, and the rest were scared away. The next day, another batch came from southern Henan. They didn't believe in evil, and lost more than 20 people in 2 days. Last week, we were mainly trying to rescue people and find out what happened, but in the end, not many people were found, and they were all alive. Seeing the middle-aged man counting on his fingers and about to cry, Liu Yu shook his head. "Call your foreman over here." Hearing their voice, the middle-aged man immediately looked at Liu Yu with a complicated expression. Liu Yu frowned. "You know so much, you must be more than just a worker, don't tell me I can't contact your foreman." This. The middle-aged man opened his mouth, wanted to say something but finally slapped his thigh. "I just can't contact my cousin. How can he be held responsible for the loss of so many people? He must have already run away and is now at sea. I just had nothing to do after eating, and I couldn't bear to stay here in the middle of the night, so I just wanted to lose fewer people. I can't get in touch with you. I really can't get in touch with you." At this point, the middle-aged man started cursing. How can this heartless person be so irresponsible? He just ran away after such a big incident. On the side, the other men's faces changed drastically when they heard that the foreman had run away. Liu Yu looked at the group of people surrounding the middle-aged man, turned around helplessly and pinched his eyebrows. Ghostland. There are countless records from ancient times to the present. Without exception, the description of the ghost realm cannot be separated from 2 points. The first is that the ghost domain is taking shape, and a great disaster is bound to happen. The second is the particularity of the ghost realm. The formation of the ghost realm is often accompanied by certain causes and effects. And it is the most direct causal force. Like resentment. When this negative emotion accumulates to the limit, it will transform into a ghost realm. Therefore, we want to break the ghost realm. We must find the root of their resentment, or in simple terms, resolve it. Of course, there is also a simplest way, which is to directly rely on your cultivation to defeat the ghost realm. Liu Yu can do this now. Even if he held the Qiansha sword, he could destroy this ghost domain without any effort. But there are still many ordinary people with vitality there, which makes things a little tricky. "What's your cousin's name?" Liu Yu stopped everyone from arguing and asked the middle-aged man. "Ding Dali." The middle-aged man's face turned red due to the yelling of everyone, and he shouted loudly subconsciously. After getting the name, Liu Yu turned around, took out his cell phone, and silently made a call. The other side. Jiang family villa. In the bathroom. A vaguely graceful figure was soaking in the bathtub. In the rising mist, that beautiful face was taking a nap with eyes closed, with a hint of intoxicating blush on her face. Just then, a phone rang. Jiang Meng slowly opened her eyes and reached out to pick up the phone from the side. "Wait until you see the caller notes clearly." Jiang Meng's lazy eyes suddenly brightened up and she sat up from the bathtub. So much so that through the bathroom glass, you could still see 2 beautiful figures that were about to emerge, and they were visibly trembling with excitement. Chapter 23, Demon. "Hello." Jiang Meng calmed his breathing and spoke softly. On the other end of the phone, Liu Yu told Jiang Meng the whole story. "Don't worry, as long as he is still in Yanqing, I will find him for you in half an hour." Listening to Jiang Meng's reply, Liu Yu smiled. "It's troublesome." As the phone hung up, Jiang Meng took a deep breath. She had said goodbye to Liu Yu before, and she still mustered up the courage to ask for his phone number before leaving. On the one hand, Liu Yu is very important to the Jiang family. On the other hand, he has his own thoughts and wants to get closer to Liu Yu. Thinking of this, Jiang Meng smiled sweetly. She put on her clothes, went downstairs, and went straight to find Jiang Qingshan. However, Jiang Meng had just entered the courtyard. In a villa on the southeast side of the Jiang family, as the curtains were opened, a gaze was cast out from the room. It was Jiang Tianfang, the second master of the Jiang family. At this moment, he was looking at the courtyard from afar, his eyes full of ferocity and cruelty. "It's already a done deal. In half a month at most, that old man will be exhausted to death." "But Liu Yu showed up, what a bullshit Tianmen." Jiang Tianfang's eyes were red and his fists were clenched so hard that they made a crackling sound. "Especially when I think of Liu Yu. Since no news came back from the people he arranged, and Jiang Meng returned to the Jiang family in a swagger. He had already guessed the fate of the Jiu master and those killers. But he just wouldn't give in. Why would that biased old guy rather give the position of head of the family to a little girl than to him? Why did he take so much trouble and carefully set up the killing moves? Just when everything seemed to be going smoothly for the acceptance, it was ruined by a guy who suddenly appeared. Why? At this time, Jiang Qianfang raised his head, and the madness and anger in his eyes seemed extremely creepy under the night sky. Humph, they are all useless guys. Jiang Qianfang gritted his teeth and then slowly turned his head. What do they say over there? I saw a sexy figure lying on the bed deep in the room, facing the questions from the second master of the Jiang family. The woman spoke slowly, her voice lazy, and only one word. Wait. Hearing this, Jiang Qianfang glared immediately, but in the end he didn't get angry. Obviously, their over there he mentioned was of great importance, and seemed to give him enough confidence. As long as they take action over there, everything will be settled. There was a brief silence. The second master of the Jiang family took off his clothes and got on the bed, and intermittent seductive sounds were heard. The other side. On the construction site. Liu Yu and Hebai were waiting on the side. As for the middle-aged man, he was fighting with those guys at this time. To be precise, he took on more than a dozen people alone. It's a bit of a disadvantage. After all, not only are 2 fists no match for 4 hands, you also have to find time to quarrel with other people. 9 out of 10 sounds involve parents. Not far away, he was just squatting on the ground, unable to hide the smile on his face. As for Liu Yu, at this time, his perception has been integrated into the ghost realm bit by bit. The layers of decadent music in the black fog were of no use to Liu Yu, but as his perception became deeper, his brows furrowed. Because the closer you get to the core of the black fog, the more you feel it is unfathomable. That kind of depth does not refer to how terrifying it is, but it feels like facing the vast ocean, as if there is no bottom to be found forever. Call. Liu Yu took a deep breath and formed a seal with one hand. A moment. An invisible wave of air burst out from Liu Yu. Hebai was the first one to feel it. To be precise, to him, the extremely masculine and strong power in Liu Yu was like water and fire. Ouch. Why bother to scream and stay 7 or 8 meters away from Liu Yu as if he were a plague god? Looking closely, a circle of gossips had already emerged between Liu Yu's eyebrows. His terrifying perception directly tore through the black fog and poured it down fiercely. Next second. Crash. It seemed like a gust of wind was blowing, enveloping Liu Yu's perception. Liu Yu's brows tightened, and his face trembled visibly. The so-called strong wind was actually in essence an ancient evil spirit that had already taken shape. What is the origin of this thing? It actually has such an ancient aura. Liu Yu's eyes were cold. This is beyond the definition of an extraordinary ghost. After all, the horror of the ghost realm lies in the fact that it is contaminated by the power of cause and effect, and possesses ancient power like it does now. A moment. A thought suddenly popped up in Liu Yu's mind. The resurrection of an ancient being. Thinking of this, Liu Yu couldn't help but reveal a murderous aura on his face. These ancient beings are the most intolerable in the general trend, and are the things that will be punished by heaven. Therefore, killing these guys is the mission of the descendants of Tianmen. But this is unlikely. There was a hint of doubt in Liu Yu's eyes. The so-called ancient existence. It refers to those people who are able to escape death or plan early to avoid disasters during the great changes in the world. These kinds of people are all terrifying. But God is fair. Every major change in the world is a baptism for all living things, leaving only those that are most suitable for survival. As for those that are eliminated, they are all deemed by heaven to be products that are not suitable for this era. Once discovered, they will be punished by heaven and before war. This military disaster refers to Tianmen. Enforce the law on behalf of God. So under normal circumstances, these old guys would never reveal their tracks on their own. They will only jump out to find a way to transcend for themselves at every critical juncture of major changes, that is, when the power of heaven is the loosest. Obviously, the Dharma ending period has lasted for nearly 300 years, and spiritual energy has been exhausted. This is far from the turning point of the general trend of the times. What is going on? Liu Yu frowned, and his perception continued to deepen into the darkness. But at this moment, a dark figure suddenly appeared in front of Liu Yu. It was a blurry figure of a woman. Liu Yu immediately released his perception. I also saw the woman's appearance clearly. She was dressed in black gauze, with thick black fog shrouding her entire body. Her facial features were cold and iron blue, and her eyes were as black as ink, with no pupils. Devil! Liu Yu was shocked and was about to take a closer look. R. The woman's face was distorted and she let out a scream, which exploded directly in Liu Yu's soul. At the same time, his perception was cut off. At the construction site entrance, Liu Yu suddenly opened his eyes, and the energy in his body surged wildly. Several breaths passed. Call. Liu Yu let out a light breath and looked forward. A scream can shake my soul. You have some strength, but that alone is not enough. Liu Yu murmured in a low voice, and there was a hint of bright golden light in his eyes. The figure just now was obviously the woman that he had mentioned before. But it was the appearance of this woman that made his doubts even greater. Because the strength she displayed is totally incomparable to the ancient aura deep in the black fog. Chapter 24, Black-Hearted Boss Ding Dali. It's late at night. A convoy of vehicles drove straight to the entrance of the construction site. Liu Yu felt something and turned around to look at Jiang Meng, who got out of the luxury car in the middle. The night wind blows. Jiang Meng was wearing a coat and walked over quickly. Liu Yu. Looking at the smile on Jiang Meng's face, most of the sadness in Liu Yu's heart quietly dissipated. Thank you for your hard work. How is the investigation going? Jiang Meng was still smiling when she heard the first half of the sentence, but immediately curled her lips when she heard the second half. We found the person, hiding in his hometown in the suburbs. When I got the news, I asked Uncle Deng to go get him overnight, and now he's brought here. Jiang Meng pointed to a car behind. The car door opened. A fat man with his hands and feet tied was thrown down. His huge beer belly made him tremble as he fell to the ground. Mr. Liu. Uncle Deng came over dragging the fat man. Liu Yu smiled and nodded, then looked at the fat man on the ground who was looking frightened and confused. Hey, is this your cousin? Liu Yu shouted to the middle-aged man lying on the ground in the distance. After nearly an hour of beating and scolding, more than a dozen people were exhausted and lay on the ground. Huh. The man raised his head with great effort, and after seeing clearly, he immediately got up. Watch, it really is you, watch. The other guys also recognized the fat man and got up. After all, their previous quarrel was just about wages, and coupled with the panic all night, everyone was filled with anger. Fuck. Black-hearted boss, give me back my hard-earned money. A group of people rushed towards the fat man, cursing. Seeing this, Uncle Deng and several bodyguards turned their heads coldly. The men were frightened and stopped where they were. Only the middle-aged man came crawling in front of the fat man, his face bruised and swollen. Brother, you have to help me make the decision. These people are going to beat me up. On the ground. Ding Dali came to his senses when he saw the middle-aged man and quickly called him cousin. He had been hiding in his hometown before, and was already so frightened that he couldn't sleep at night. Then he was tied up like a dead pig by the Jiang family, and his courage was almost broken. Boy, what are you doing at the construction site so late at night? Ding Dali looked around and felt like his head was about to explode. At this time, Liu Yu waved his hand to signal the middle-aged man to go away and squatted beside Ding Dali. Hey, what's going on at this construction site? Ding Dali looked at Liu Yu in shock, and there seemed to be some huge concerns in his flickering eyes. Explain. Liu Yu shouted in a low voice, and his majestic aura instantly calmed Ding Dali down. You have lost dozens of people at this construction site. If you want to put an end to this matter, tell me the truth about what happened. Liu Yu spoke each word clearly, and at the same time a golden light appeared faintly in his eyes. It just so happened that Ding Dali also saw this golden light. Immediately, he widened his eyes and looked at Liu Yu carefully. Are you a professional? On the side, Jiang Meng said coldly, Mr. Liu is a hidden master, and today he is here to deal with your matter. Ding Dali straightened his back instantly when he heard this. He was of course aware of Jiang Meng, Yanqing's golden phoenix, so he knocked his head hard to the ground with a thud. Master, you are here. You have to save me. I have a business worth hundreds of millions. I want to die. A trace of disgust flashed in Liu Yu's eyes when he heard the voice. At this point, he was still talking about money. Just get to the point. Liu Yu said coldly. Ding Dali did not hide it either, he slapped his thigh and cried. Master, I subcontracted this place. I originally wanted to build a Times Square that integrates commercial and residential areas, but who knew there was such a trap here? It's all my fault for being greedy. I know that cheap things don't come cheap. On the side, Liu Yu frowned. Greedy? Did you know about the pitfall when you took over the contract? Ding Dali nodded with a bitter face, and then told the whole story from beginning to end. I know a little bit. When I took over the contract, my boss told me that there were some things buried in the construction site that couldn't be exposed to light. If they were released, it would be extremely dangerous. But I didn't believe it at that time. Who would have thought that in the past 2 years, every time work started for less than half a month, the workers would either fall ill or collapse? It was very strange, but fortunately nothing happened until half a year ago. When Ding Dali said this, his face changed and his cheeks began to tremble visibly. Half a year ago, a palm-sized hole suddenly appeared in the middle of the construction site. Someone lowered a probe, but couldn't find the bottom at first. When they reached more than 20 meters, they felt an obstacle. As the probe continued to go down, something went wrong. Everyone felt as if the sky had suddenly turned dark. The 2 workers who were touching the probe fainted and their faces turned pale. They were sent to the hospital but no symptoms were found. They died in the hospital that night. At this moment, Ding Dali seemed to be completely immersed in his memories, and hurriedly raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his face. When dealing with this matter, the construction site was closed for 2 days. When work resumed, it was found that the hole had expanded to about 1 meter. It was pitch black and the workers said they felt cold all over when they entered the construction site. They couldn't stand it within a few hours. On the side, Liu Yu frowned as he listened. The strange behavior of those workers mentioned by Ding Dali was obviously due to them being directly hit by evil spirits. As the saying goes, people have 3 fires, which are born from the gathering of yarn. But if one is in an environment with evil energy, the 3 fires of ordinary people will not be able to withstand the impact of the evil energy. The worst were the 2 workers who died in the hospital. What about later? Since the accident happened half a year ago, how come he got so involved later? Liu Yu looked at Ding Dali coldly, his eyes becoming angry. Ding Dali was speechless for a moment, then he forced a smile on his face. The construction site can't be abandoned. Such a weird pit must not be left there, so I tried to arrange for someone to fill it with dirt. I didn't expect that the person would still be missing. As he spoke, Ding Dali came closer to Liu Yu in a begging and flattering manner. Master, please help me. I owe the bank all their hundreds of millions of dollars for this stall. I also moved the pre-sale money to other construction sites. Of course. Don't worry about the pre-sold units. Even if the construction takes 8 or 10 years, ordinary people can sue them. But the bank can't make any mistakes. Just make sure that my construction site can start working normally, and I will give you money, lots of money. Hearing Ding Dali's almost inhumane words, Liu Yu's eyes became terribly cold. What a good sentence for ordinary people, let them sue. At the side, Jiang Meng also frowned and glanced at Uncle Deng. Immediately, Uncle Deng stepped forward, pulled Ding Dali around, and slapped him in the face. Less than a minute. Ding Dali fell to the ground, his face covered in blood. Liu Yu looked down at the trembling Ding Dali and said in a cold voice, "Who did you buy the second package from?" Chapter 25, Ancient Tomb in the Construction Site. Woo woo. Ding Dali's mouth was full of blood and he raised his head tremblingly. Mr. He, I don't know anything else. It's just that trap, it caused me so much trouble. Looking at Ding Dali's appearance, Liu Yu didn't ask any more questions. The 3 fires in this guy's body have been weakened by the evil spirit. In addition, he was frightened and beaten at night, so he could faint at any time. The most important thing. In this state, Ding Dali usually answers questions instinctively. Say I don't know. The probability is that you really don't know. Jiang Meng, please make some arrangements and help me find out as much information as possible about Mr. He. Liu Yu glanced at Jiang Meng, then walked straight towards the construction site. Original place. Jiang Meng turned around and gave Uncle Deng a few instructions, then quickly caught up with Liu Yu. When Ding Dali saw the 2 men leave, Uncle Deng next to him started to get ready again. Hey, don't leave. We need to be civilized and live in a society ruled by law. What is this rough guy trying to do? Don't, I'm trapping you, you monkey, stop slapping me in the face. Ahead. Jiang Meng followed Liu Yu closely and was about to speak when suddenly her whole body trembled uncontrollably. Liu Yu. Jiang Meng let out a low cry and instinctively grabbed Liu Yu's hand. Seeing Jiang Meng's uncomfortable expression, Liu Yu quickly raised his hand and formed a seal, tapping Jiang Meng's brow. With the protection of Taoism. Immediately, the discomfort on Jiang Meng's face faded away, and she looked around vigilantly, not forgetting to smile at Liu Yu. Liu Yu, what exactly is hidden in here? Liu Yu shook his head and told Jiang Meng about what happened in the ghost realm. The best way to deal with these things is to resolve the grudges, so that the harm to those who fall into the ghost realm will be minimized. But we didn't get any specific information about the ghost realm, and it just got more and more complicated. Hearing this, Jiang Meng hesitated for a moment and said, could it be that the ghost realm is related to humans? Yes. Liu Yu nodded heavily. Seeing this, Jiang Meng's heart was inexplicably shocked. She had an indescribable feeling, as if Liu Yu's answer represented some unpredictable and terrible consequences. Liu Yu also took a deep breath. In his previous investigation, he found that the weirdness of the ghost realm was the ancient power and this weak evil demon. Evil demon. Usually the master of the ghost realm. What's wrong is that in the ocean, the former overlord has become like a small fish. And from what Ding Dali said, we learned that this ghost domain obviously did not appear suddenly. Maybe someone had planned it long ago. Thinking of this, Liu Yu felt a chill in his heart. Although I don't know who dares to manipulate the ghost realm. But once the ghost realm gets out of control, it will be enough to destroy an area and endanger countless people. Aside. Jiang Meng didn't know what Liu Yu was thinking, nor did she know the seriousness of the matter, but it was the first time she saw such a serious look on Liu Yu's face. Don't worry, I will gather the strength of the Jiang family and find the information of Mr. He for you. Jiang Meng said solemnly. Well, go wait at the door first. After saying that, Liu Yu pointed to the entrance of the construction site. I can't find out by asking. Now I can only go down and take a look myself. I also want to know what the core of this ghost domain looks like. Liu Yu slowly rolled up his sleeves, an invisible force swept in all directions, and his pupils instantly became brighter. Even though Jiang Meng was very worried, she finally nodded and stepped back. She is very smart. Know what you are good at and what you can't help with, and don't let Liu Yu be distracted. Be careful. Jiang Meng gave some instructions and then walked out. Liu Yu walked step by step towards the depths of the construction site. Not far away. Why did he keep following Liu Yu? He wanted to come over but it seemed impossible, and he was grimacing in anxiety. Hey, Liu Yu, are we going to beat that bitch now? Please take back that annoying thing on your body. It's itchy and uncomfortable. I don't dare to get close to you. And what does that woman have to do with you? I saw you guys were about to hold hands together and couldn't move your eyes away when you were talking. Liu Yu's mouth twitched when he heard the voice, and he turned around and scolded in annoyance. Shut up. Why did he glare and shout? You actually yelled at me. You're so good, Liu Yu. You always keep a cool and aloof personality with others, but you speak softly to her. Honestly, what is your relationship with her? Hearing He Bai's words, Liu Yu immediately raised his hand. After all, Jiang Meng hadn't gone far. Liu Yu, who was so angry, rushed directly towards He Bai. At the same time, Jiang Meng, who had just walked to the entrance of the construction site, also heard He Bai's roar. Although she didn't know He Bai. But after hearing this, she couldn't help but stop and turned her head with a blush on her face. Speak softly, Mr. Liu. Jiang Meng said this subconsciously, but suddenly reacted and his expression instantly became serious again. Uncle Deng and several bodyguards in front of her all looked away tacitly. Uncle Deng pressed Ding Dali's face and slapped him on the top of his head again. The other side. The evil spirit is getting worse and worse. Liu Yu murmured in a low voice, and the rolling murderous energy rose into the sky like a fountain. Through the evil spirit, Liu Yu saw a huge round pit with no bottom in sight. And a few meters away, He Bai, who had a bruised nose and swollen eyes, rubbed his cheeks, pursed his lips, and looked at Liu Yu with resentment on his face. Let's go, get down. Liu Yu turned his head to look at He Bai, then took the lead and jumped directly into the big pit. Snort. Why did he snort angrily before daring to mutter? He beat me up for a woman. You have no loyalty and no ambition. What's so good about women? He just dumped one and now he's hooking up with another one. He cursed and swore while staring at the pit vigilantly, afraid that Liu Yu would suddenly stick his head out. Waited for a few seconds. He finally breathed a sigh of relief, lay on the ground and groped his way to the edge of the pit, then closed his eyes and rolled freely. And at this time in the pit, Liu Yu fell quickly, looking around. Through the thick evil aura, he saw what seemed to be some man-made carvings in the soil. Until it fell to the bottom of the pit. Liu Yu looked up at the top of his head and gradually let go of his perception. Next second. Call. Liu Yu couldn't help but take a deep breath. The big pit now was not caused by soil collapse as imagined, but on the contrary, it was like suddenly appearing in front of a palace. It turns out to be a tomb hidden underground. Liu Yu said with narrowed eyes. At the same time, there was a gust of wind, followed by something heavy hitting the ground. It is the Why of freedom rolling down. But the moment he landed, a murderous aura wrapped around Hebai's whole body like a protective shield, and the injuries he suffered when he fell began to gradually heal under the nourishment of the murderous aura. Even including the previous chest injury. After his injuries were fully recovered, Hebai seemed like a different person. He slowly got up, and a completely unfamiliar aura suddenly emerged from his body. Full of ferocity, violence, and cruelty. Chapter 26 Underground Palace. Call. Heavy breathing came out of Hebai's mouth. Low and hoarse, like a mad beast. If you look closely, Hebai at this moment also had his shoulders drooped and was trembling like Hashiman, and the whole person looked extremely weird. Liu Yu turned his head and looked at Hebai, his eyes full of solemnity. Obviously, the evil spirit in Hebai's body has been completely aroused in this environment. Why not? Liu Yu called out softly. Behind. Several breaths passed. Hebai slowly raised his head, and a trace of clarity emerged with difficulty in his pair of scarlet eyes as he looked at Liu Yu. Liu Yu, I feel a little uncomfortable. He spoke with difficulty, then hugged his head and slowly sat on the ground. Let me take a break. The woman is in there. I found her, call me. Hearing the voice, Liu Yu looked at Hebai deeply. When he turned around, his eyes were full of relief and even a smile. Really? The 2 years of getting along have been very effective. At the same time, it also made Liu Yu more determined in his thoughts. The star of misfortune is destined by fate and is born to represent the negative emotions in the world. But he just didn't believe it. Wait for me to call. Liu Yu said softly and strode forward. At this time, the scene of the underground cave was appearing more and more in front of Liu Yu. There are rows of green bricks under the patio, and through the round earth layer, you can vaguely see the glutinous rice and lime inside. And right in front, there is a narrow slope-like corridor, which obviously leads to the tomb chamber. With a thoughtful look in his eyes, Liu Yu walked a few steps and looked at the hole that was just big enough for one person. There happened to be some cloth hanging on the mud. Did they all enter from here? Liu Yu picked up the cloth and saw that it was the material of some work clothes. Apparently those people fell into the pit and then slid in through this passage. Why bother? Have you been here before? Liu Yu turned around and shouted to Hebai, who was not far away. At this time, Hebai was standing there trembling, as if he was suppressing something. Right here. I climbed in from here before. The path below is easy to walk on. You can slide down with your eyes closed. But it's not easy to walk up. You have to force yourself to climb up. Liu Yu nodded when he heard that, and glanced at Hebai with encouragement in his eyes. Don't let irrelevant things affect you, just follow me closely. Hearing Liu Yu's words, Hebai clenched his fists tightly, moved step by step, and caught up with Liu Yu. A fate of being unlucky and alone. It's like a ball of ink, born to pollute the world. People who know that Hebai is destined to be a lonely star will only have murderous intentions towards him. His original family, and even everyone he came into contact with, would hate him from the bottom of their hearts and avoid him. But as the carrier of this ball of ink, this person is innocent and pitiful. Ahead. Liu Yu formed a seal with one hand and raised his other hand into a fist. Boom! A violent gust of air swept around him. Break it for me! Liu Yu's eyes widened with anger, and he punched the narrow corridor in the air. With a thud. I saw an invisible force suddenly pouring in from the passage, accompanied by the shaking of the whole. After everything calmed down, what appeared in front of Liu Yu was a passage more than 2 meters wide. If you look closely, you will see that the passage is constructed of stairs, sloping downward step by step. Why bother, let's go. Liu Yu shouted and strode down the stairs. At the same time, suddenly, a pair of scarlet eyes appeared in the darkness. Yes, who is it? There is that damned, unkillable villain. Wrong. There is one more. With the faint murmur, the pair of eyes gradually became extremely ferocious. R. A violent and sharp cry, like a tide, surged out madly in all directions. When the sound appeared on the steps, boom! Liu Yu raised his hand and blocked the surging evil spirit. Devil! Liu Yu's eyes were solemn, but his steps did not stop at all. Soon, at the deepest part of the steps, there is a thick pile of mud. It seemed that Liu Yu's previous punch had squeezed all the soil, and now it was all piled together. Why? What was here before? Liu Yu asked. Of course, the main reason he asked was to take the opportunity to talk more with He Bai, so as to keep He Bai awake at all times. It turned out to be a muddy passage. After climbing over it, there was an iron gate. It was very wide inside. Very wide. Why so difficult? A voice came from behind. Liu Yu looked back and saw He Bai walking down the stairs, forcing a smile at him. Good. Liu Yu smiled and nodded. He turned around and threw a few more powerful punches. The whistling wind from his fists alone was enough to scrape away layer after layer of the soil. Disciple of Chen Men. Before practicing Taoism, you must first improve your physical body. It can be said that even if Liu Yu has no cultivation at all, he can become one of the strongest people in the world just by relying on his physical strength. Under 3 punches. When the dust settled, a dark green door was revealed. Huh! Liu Yu stared at the gate and frowned slightly. The reason is that there is a Taoist rune engraved on the gate, which penetrates half an inch into the iron gate. Is this the 9 Palaces Demon Suppression Formation? Liu Yu looked at the formation carefully and recognized its origin. The 9 Palaces Demon Suppression Formation is the signature formation of the Zhengyi sect. Judging from the remaining spiritual charm, it was created at least 100 years ago by a great celestial master. Could this be some evil place suppressed by the Zhengyi sect? Liu Yu waved his hand to clear the dirt, and saw a huge gap in the koan position of the 9 palaces. The palace was broken, the formation was leaked, no wonder. Seeing that the 9 palace formation was broken, Liu Yu suddenly realized and raised his hand to push open the door. As the door opened, a terrifying evil spirit almost gushed out. Liu Yu waved his sword, and the 8 diagrams appeared between his eyebrows, opening a path through the evil spirit. At the same time, the scene in front of him also appeared before his eyes. Behind the door, in the dark passage, mysterious runes were carved on the walls all around, and even on the floor tiles. This is. Liu Yu glanced at the wall of the tomb and frowned again. Taoist runes, something's wrong, the aura is wrong. Liu Yu looked at those runes, especially when he closed his eyes and carefully felt the evil energy flowing on the runes. Demonic energy. Liu Yu's eyes suddenly opened. The so-called devil. It refers to people who practice Taoism being swallowed up and occupied by negative forces, becoming their carrier, which is called being possessed by the devil. For ordinary Taoists, every step from building a foundation to entering the Tao requires tenacious perseverance, and moving forward requires even greater opportunities. But once you become possessed by the devil, the negative forces between heaven and earth came almost at the touch of a hand. Naturally, cultivators with weak wills are most likely to get lost in this surging power, until they completely lose themselves in the end. But he can be called a demon cultivator. Even when being swallowed by negative forces, one can still find one's own existence in the end. This kind of person is undoubtedly powerful. Thinking of this, Liu Yu couldn't help but take a deep breath. It seems that the source of this ancient evil spirit is a demon cultivator who has fallen into the devil's way. Chapter 27, How Dare You Glare at Me? Ancient Evil Spirit. Liu Yu's definition must have been at least 400 years ago. The Dharma ending period lasts for 300 years. Before this, there were countless Taoist sects in the world, and good and evil coexisted. And with the arrival of the Dharma ending period, the battle between good and evil lasted for more than 70 years and spread throughout the world of cultivation. Eventually, there were 9 fewer cultivators in the world, most of the inheritances disappeared without a trace, and the few that remained also lingered on in seclusion. Until the spiritual energy completely declines and the Dharma ending period arrives, the mundane world becomes the only mainstream in this world. This is the terrifying thing about the way of heaven. The trend is like a tide, and all unsuitable existences will be cleansed out. Certainly. No matter how cruel the disaster is, there is always someone who can find a way out of it. Just like the tomb you see in front of you. If it really is a demon from 400 years ago. Liu Yu's fingers trembled involuntarily. In an instant, the Qiansha sword located in the Qianmen old house suddenly glowed red, as if it sensed some kind of call, and began to tremble. Call. Liu Yu shook his head and suppressed this speculation. Even if it really is a demon from 400 years ago, or an even older being. But it is not tolerated by the trend of heaven. Unless they really want to go out for one last crazy spin. Otherwise, at least we can talk. Thinking of this, Liu Yu loosened his fingers and continued walking forward. But at this moment, whine. A faint buzzing sound passed through Liu Yu's ears. Liu Yu paused and looked forward. I saw a ball of scarlet mist strangely appearing in the passage and spreading little by little. Before Liu Yu could react, Hebai rushed in front of him without knowing when, his eyes fixed on the scarlet mist, with saliva even at the corners of his mouth. Why bother? Calm down. Liu Yu suddenly grabbed Hebai and pulled him back hard. But Hebai's response was to turn around suddenly and stare at Liu Yu fiercely. Next second. Bang! Liu Yu beat Hebai so hard that he fell to the ground, and the floor tiles were shaking. You can see how powerful this slap was. Why did you hit me? The evil aura around Hebai was like that of an evil ghost, but he touched his face, feeling somewhat confused and unsure. Try to glare at me again. Liu Yu raised his hand and scolded Hebai. Hebai shrank his neck, and the murderous aura in his body was surging as if he wanted to eat Liu Yu, but he said stubbornly, I didn't glare at you, I couldn't control it. Just stay calm at a distance. If you can't control yourself anymore, I'll come and help you. Liu Yu picked up Hebai and threw him back, while raising his fist and waving it vigorously. Seeing this, why did he quickly get up and hug his arms as if he was trying to control himself? HMPH, I know, I won't glare anymore. Why did he pout and turn away angrily? After dealing with this trouble, Liu Yu looked at the gradually approaching red mist. Let's not waste any more time. Let me see what it is. Liu Yu tore off his clothes, raised his hands and formed a seal, and a terrifying golden light instantly burst out from his body. Xing, Yu, Ji, Zhan, Ni, He. A series of ethereal sounds came out of his mouth, and at the same time, the strength in his body increased rapidly. His momentum alone was enough to make the blood-red mist begin to retreat. Boom! There was a loud bang. Liu Yu raised his hand and tore the blood-red mist apart, then took a step forward and rushed forward, so fast that he almost left a shadow. Come on. Good. He let out a low roar and quickly chased after Liu Yu. But when passing through the dispersed fog, Hebai subconsciously stopped and crazy greed appeared in his eyes. No, I can't. Hebai reacted immediately and shook his head fiercely. He seemed to see the evil spirit in his body beginning to devour the red mist. Spit it out, spit it all out. Liu Yu won't allow you to be so unbridled. Spit it out. Why bother jumping up and slapping the mist? It's no use. In a panic, he punched himself on the nose. The pain made his eyes go black, and at the same time, the evil spirit strangely shrank into his body. But they rushed out again immediately, glaring at Hebai, looking extremely angry. Shut up, everyone. If you continue to mess around, I'll beat you to death. Why did he roar angrily, and he pointed his fist at his nose with determination on his face, and kept this posture to chase Liu Yu. Ahead. Liu Yu walked through the passage and finally came to an open area of nearly 100 square meters. Is this the center of the tomb? Liu Yu looked solemn, his eyes gleaming with golden light and carrying a hint of holiness. In this open space, he also saw the missing workers, all of them unconscious in the pits beneath their feet. But in Liu Yu's eyes, he could see the energy and spirit of these workers being drawn out bit by bit and floating towards one place. Following the direction where the spirit was floating, we finally found a box placed deep in the tomb. This is. Liu Yu stared at the box, just taking a glance. A feeling of terror shook his heart. Is this the source of the ancient evil spirit? Liu Yu suppressed the evil feeling that made his soul tremble, took a step forward, and rushed directly towards the box. The moment it reaches the box, "R!" a scream suddenly exploded. The violent evil spirit made Liu Yu pause and even took a step back uncontrollably. At this moment, the box opened strangely, an endless evil spirit gushed out. At the same time, a figure also rushed out. Liu Yu looked up. The figure was a woman. She was wearing a long black dress, her facial features were pale and bloodless, her long hair was scattered behind her, her eyes were lifeless and without pupils, only a chilling coldness that penetrated her bones. It was the woman he had seen in his perception before. Devil! Liu Yu spat out 2 words coldly, and then looked at the box again. Mid-air. The evil demon that flew out was filled with murderous aura and extreme brutality, especially when she saw that Liu Yu dared to ignore her. R! The evil demon opened its mouth and let out a sinister roar, so that the entire tomb began to tremble at the roar. But unfortunately, why not? Liu Yu shouted casually and turned to look behind him. Stop this evil demon. Beat him up as you like, but don't eat him. Can you do that? Behind. He walked over with a trembling hand. When he saw the evil demon, the evil spirit in his body wished it could leave Hebai's body and devour him. I can do it. Why bother nodding desperately? Even though his eyes were strained, the expression he revealed was simply a desire for revenge. Liu Yu looked at Hebai deeply and gave him a look of trust and encouragement. Then fight. Hearing this, Hebai let out a roar and rushed towards the evil demon. The evil demon obviously also knew Hebai, and with new and old grudges, he rushed forward in anger.